Chapter 1. Nova. 6 months ago, I met a beautiful man who said ugly things. Not to me, of course. Thorne Badd didn't speak a single word to me for the entire hour I sat across from him. But to others there, he was quick to let a sarcastic remark bleed from his tongue at every opportunity. He was especially crisp toward my father. Secretly, I loved that. I'd never liked the way Dad did things. I'd also never say that to his face. I was a good daughter where it counted. I bowed my head and went wherever I was told to go, but I still hated it. My father's personal life had long ago mixed with his corrupt business, and there was no way to pull the two apart. It was like mangling a wad of gum into your scalp and then trying to clean every individual strand of hair. He was tangled in sin, and we, as his children, were tangled up too. Not that my brothers cared. Both Larchmont and Richard had been eager to come to this meeting between our family and the Badds. They were reveling in having the upper hand, an advantage brought on by gruesome violence and the fear of more to come. I was different. I'd hoped to go on forever keeping my distance. Neither Mom nor Dad had asked me to dirty my hands. Not yet. The reality is that you can't separate yourself from family just by wishing. And you definitely can't walk away once blood has been spilled. So I sat at the table in the middle of the Badd family's ballroom, breaking bread with our enemies, and waiting for Maverick, the patriarch, and his 2 other sons to show up. We'd been sitting in near silence for 15 minutes already. Like the ballroom we were in, their whole estate was gorgeous. I was especially jealous of all the land they had. My parents were more interested in the clean lines of modern architecture than in greenery and dirt. I'd grown up crawling across cement and marble. I'd wandered nervously down dark halls past the array of warped statues that my mother fancied. They'd watched me with their dead eyes, their arms wound tight over their chests, unable to hold or hug or touch. Maybe that was why Mom liked them so much. My attention kept zipping to the door, to the security guards, theirs and ours. If I wasn't so afraid of the consequences, I could walk out of here, get in my car, and be back in Boston within the hour. Even accounting for the time needed to get some Dunkin' coffee, I'd be snuggled in my bed with a sketch pad before dinner. It'd be heaven. "What's wrong?" a feathery voice asked in my right ear. Darla, my younger sister. "I don't want to be here," I mumbled. I wanted nothing to do with any of this, and I was ignorant enough to think that if I just sat there and stared at my chocolate strawberries, I could walk away from this meeting unchanged. Then he entered the room. He was shorter than his father and his older brother Costello, who had entered with him. But somehow he defied reality, his presence looming, filling every crack in the ballroom. Thorne wore long sleeves and a high-necked shirt the color of fresh wheat, things that only hinted at the shape of his body. But I could tell his shoulders were broad, his torso lean and powerful. Maverick scanned the room with his piercingly icy eyes. Thorne's were starkly different. They were like those of his mother, who hadn't stopped watching us from the head of the table, black as a galaxy. He moved with ease, comfortable in a room full of people who would have loved to see him dead. This was a battlefield seconds before someone began the charge, and he didn't care. His strong chin cut the air, his gaze sweeping across the table, ultimately falling on me. I wasn't ready for that. I don't think anybody could be. It was like jumping into a swirling storm when you'd been promised a sunny day. Instantly, I ducked my head. In my ears, I heard Darla's muffled giggle. than the warm, heart-pulling sound of Thorne's chuckle. I glanced up in time to see him whisper something to Costello as they sat down. He didn't look at me again after that. I prayed he would, but it never happened. It drove me mad. I couldn't explain what had created such a yearning inside me. Why was I so focused on getting this man to notice me? Maybe it was because I'd heard so much about him. It was no secret under my roof that my family was obsessed with his. I'd seen photos and videos and even had intel recited to me about the Badds. I'd always thought Thorne was interesting. Unquestionably handsome, no doubt. But a picture can't compare to flesh and blood. Hearing his gritty, low voice as it purred casual insults that were hard to counter, seeing him relax in his seat and swirl his glass and not care at all about what his family or mine thought of his behavior. It was fascinating. But Thorne Badd didn't find me nearly as exciting. Through all the back-and-forth discussion between his family and mine, he acted like I didn't exist. And I began to feel like I didn't. Selfishly, I wished that something would happen, something that would make him look at me, see me. My father was speaking. Things were heating up. I saw how Costello hunkered in place, his frown severe. His knitted eyebrows pulled the long scar across his face tighter. "We're not at war," Dad said carefully. "Because if we were, none of you would be here. Not one." He lifted his glass. "You're all part of a grand family, a grander heritage. Though it's funny, you choose a name like the Badds." He winked. "What was wrong with Frederickson?" A ripple moved through the other side of the table. Thorne didn't flinch, but he did glance at Maverick. This was a bomb my father had been wanting to drop. That we knew exactly who the Badds used to be before Maverick changed his last name. People didn't change their surnames without good reason when it gave them access to the advantages of a royal lineage. I knew the reason. But did they know why we knew? Covertly, I watched Thorne. He was facing away, showing me his sharp profile. He was gorgeous from every angle. With a soft sigh, my father said, "We're a simple family that profits greatly from all of you remembering your place." His dimples deepened with his wide smile. "This peace was almost broken by one man's simple mistake." He was talking about my brother Darian. It's the reason we were all here. My dad kept talking. "In the future, there will be no more mistakes of such magnitude. If none of you chase the power your father abandoned, we'll all live long, happy lives." He was promising them a truce. I was sure that deep down he didn't mean it. My father had always spoken out of one side of his mouth while lying out of the other. I didn't get the feeling that any of these people believed him. But I wasn't focusing. I was distracted beyond reason in the middle of this political tension. All I wanted was to catch his eye one more time. I had no clue how to make it happen. Darla was the one who made guys' heads spin. She fought off their advances with a tilted smile and perfectly timed hair flips. I didn't have her skills. I was too shy, too afraid of making some sort of mistake. The boys I'd grown up with wanted their girls to be bold. I was not bold. I had never been bold. But I wished I could be. Because I had the sense that my whole world would open up if I could be less afraid. People would look at me and see me. I'd be capable of slouching as comfortably in my own skin as Hawthorne was, and men like him wouldn't forget I was sitting within arm's length. I wanted that so much that my very being ached like a pulled muscle. So I sat there and silently made my pathetic wish. I couldn't have known then that I was curling a finger on the proverbial monkey's paw. My parents had told me many times that for every gain, there must be a sacrifice. Nothing in life comes free. Not money, not power, and certainly not love. I assumed that, to become who I wanted to be, I'd have to suffer. I didn't know I'd have to die as well.
Chapter 2. Hawthorne. Was it wrong to mourn the death of a strip club? Staring at the yellow tape crisscrossing the black, locked door of the building, I experienced mixed emotions. It was too easy to imagine the neon sign, shaped like a girl in a martini glass, never lighting up again. No more dancers. No more late-night rounds of tequila. No more girls trying to charm me so they could get away with skipping stage sets or being late. For the past 8 years, I'd helped run the Dirty Dolls. I've never been known as the responsible one in my family, so I should have been relieved that the chore was off my shoulders. I wasn't. Don't get all psychoanalytical, I quickly told myself. I'm only bummed because I hoped to kill a few more years stretched out on that VIP couch. Thanks to Darian Valentine, it wasn't going to happen. 7 months ago, I'd nearly lost more than a strip club because of that psycho. I'd thought he was just another suit-wearing asshole getting handsy with whatever pair of legs got too close. I couldn't have guessed he was dangerous, or that he'd hurt Gina. She'd been dancing at the Dirty Dolls long enough for it to be her career. People asked for her because she wielded a healthy pair of tits. But me? I'd loved her no-nonsense attitude. She didn't take shit from anyone. Unfortunately, that included our lawyers. My father had confided to me weeks ago that the club would be running once we settled out of court with Gina. Except she was dragging her feet, asking for more security, more rules, more everything. And she was right. If we'd done our jobs, she wouldn't have gotten hurt. And I wouldn't be missing my cotton candy and cocoa butter smelling VIP couch. Sighing, I adjusted my jacket and turned away from the building. Without the Dirty Dolls, I didn't know how to spend my days and nights. I didn't even have my siblings to mess around with. Each of them was busy with their own shit. Life was quiet. Life was boring. After climbing into my Escalade, I floored it down the street. A ribbon of blue peaked above, sometimes hidden by the tall buildings. The humidity was oppressive, and it had only just rolled over into June. Another reason I missed the club, I mused bitterly. The low lights and air conditioning were hard to beat. I'd spent many a summer wasting away in glorious slothfulness on my beloved couch. Determined to break free of my poor mood, I sped up until I exited onto the highway. Here I could drive faster than the tight city streets allowed. But my freedom was short. Without any traffic, it didn't take long to make it into Newport, where my family's home was. Gliding up to the huge, twisted metal gates, I tapped a button near my steering wheel. The gates split apart like a giant raven's wings. The sun lit up the slate driveway that curved down toward the sprawling estate. When I was small, I used to run around the corridors of our mansion with wild abandon. It drove my father into a furious state. But I didn't care. I was too busy searching for the inevitable doorway to some secret world, a place full of magic and adventure, somewhere I could feel like I had a purpose. I never found it. Home sweet home. Red lights blinked at me from different positions in the yard. You see, Darian Valentine had been just the tip of all the drama this past year. His whole family was a bunch of psychos who, for reasons I'm still not sure of, would prefer me and the rest of the Badds buried in the cold ground. My father had ultimately arranged a sit-down with their whole crew. I'd been there too. We were all expected to attend. It had been strange to eat finger sandwiches with the people who'd caused everyone so much damn trouble. Curtis Valentine, the dad of the filthy bunch, had offered us a truce that felt like a warning. Like he knew everything about all of us, about my father and his history, and he'd be more than pleased to use it against us if he could. But here we were now, all boring bliss and nothing gained but security cameras. Oh, and guard dogs. Lots of those. Francesca, my little sister, loathed them. She was sure the German shepherds would eat her little terrier, Mick. It didn't help that I'd made 1, or 5, jokes about it. It was too easy to ruffle her feathers. I hadn't meant to drive her away on some vacation to Miami. Fran hadn't said it was my fault, but I knew. After parking my car in the massive garage, I stepped out and scanned the vehicles. We owned everything from yellow Mustangs to violet and gold motorcycles. That wasn't my sort of thing. Kane, Fran's twin brother, was Mr. Bad Boy Extreme. I preferred walls of metal surrounding me as I floored it at 95 miles an hour. Most non-insane people would agree with me. I considered the shiny cars. Maybe I'll drive a different one tomorrow. It would be a change in my routine. A minor change, but these days I'd take what I could get. Entering the mudroom attached to the garage, I draped my thin jacket over a brass hook on the wall. "I'm home," I said, wending my way toward the kitchen. The second I passed through the front room with its curving staircases, a young woman in a dark gray dress and crisp apron spotted me. Susie was one of our many maids. "Sir," she said, bobbing her head so her chin-length hair swayed. "You know I hate it when you call me that." Sighing, I scratched at the back of my neck. "Is anyone else home?" She pointed upward. "Lulabelle is in her room." Her finger changed direction. "Your father is in his study. Mrs. Badd was with him, last I saw." Without turning, she gestured over her shoulder to the back of the mansion. "And your mother's guests are eating in the garden." Mom had hated how empty our house was. She'd gone and invited several relatives to stay with us. I didn't know most of these random aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd come to live with us for the summer. I didn't care to. But it was nice for Mom. She had people to entertain. I liked seeing her happy. "Thanks," I said, starting to walk down the hallway toward the parlor. "Of course, sir," Susie said, ignoring my request that she not call me that. My shoes glided over the maroon rug. As loud as I tended to speak, I naturally walked with a silent ease. I'd startled many enemies and delighted many women when I'd appeared behind them without notice. I'd been told it was a skill people were jealous of. Would they be so envious if they knew I'd gained it by spending my childhood tiptoeing around my father? Maverick Badd had always been a pillar of intense anger and not much else. You could probably set him in front of a movie about a dozen cute puppies dying in a plane crash, and he still wouldn't shed a tear. That was why, when I walked into his study and saw him hunched forward in his wing-backed chair, I instantly knew something was wrong. His head was low enough that I could see the faint thinning of his dark hair on his scalp. His wide legs looked unstable, as if he couldn't have stood up if he tried. In his fingers, he clutched his phone. He rubbed the edge of it over and over. The blue-blooded bastard who'd scowled at me since I'd been able to form memories, judging me, berating me to be a better man, now looked like a strong wind could knock him over. He'd never seemed old, but here, in the orange glow of the lamps studding the wide room, Maverick was frail beyond his years. What the hell had happened? I started forward, my shoes brushing over the expensive carpet. My approach stirred him, his blue eyes locked on me, the edges red. Had he been crying? That set my mind spinning. My father scanned my face. He saw my open concern. Reaching up, he drew a wide palm over his features. It reset him somewhat, enough that when he looked at me again, I didn't think he was on the verge of falling apart. "Thorne," he said, tucking his phone away. "Come in. We need to talk." "What is it?" I asked, letting a nervous laugh break free. "You look like someone just died." He didn't correct me. "Shit," I whispered. My father sighed. "I received a phone call an hour ago." "He's been sitting here like this for an hour?" His eyes drifted away, then back to me. Some of the fierceness I knew too well was back in his stare. The call was about Torino. It was a name I'd heard so rarely I could count the times on one hand. Torino was the country my father had grown up in, the place he would have ruled as king, and my brothers and I as princes, if he hadn't abandoned the crown and come to the States before any of us were even born. I'd never been to Torino. I knew very little about the place. Dad spoke grandly of our heritage, but when it came down to the details, he seemed fine with leaving it all in the past. "Okay," I said, sitting on the chaise across from him. "You have my full attention." His fingers twitched, like he was imagining he was still holding his phone. "I don't know how much this will mean to you, Hawthorne. Even your mother doesn't seem to know how to react to this news." He studied the mantel over the cold fireplace. I wondered what he was seeing. "I'll skip to the important bit," he said, not meeting my curious eyes. "The king of Torino has passed away. My brother is dead." I didn't know how much that should mean to me either. I'd never met my uncle, never seen a photo of him. If I was wondering anything, it was how someone had known how to reach Maverick from across the ocean. Was I wrong? Was he still in touch with his home country? Maverick's eyes darted to me. I swear he was reading my mind. "I haven't talked to anyone from Torino since the day I boarded that plane and left. One of my men has been keeping tabs online for any mention of the place. When news broke about my brother's death, he called me." Agitation controlled my limbs. I rubbed the velvety chaise, then, once I noticed I was doing it, forced myself to hold still. "I'm sorry." I didn't know what else to say. How did I even try to comfort my father over this? Air slid loudly through his nose. "I'm flying out to attend the funeral. I want you to come with me." "Me?" I asked, startled. "Why?" Grunting, he pushed himself to his feet. I watched him circle around to stand over me. The weakness was gone. This was the lion of a father I'd grown up with. "Because I said so." I crinkled my nose. "I feel like I'd be your last choice. Did you already ask Kane or Franny? Is everyone you'd rather take too busy to drop their lives and go with you?" He narrowed his eyes. "Are you going to come, or do you have something more important to attend to?" Of course he knew I had nothing going on. Biting back a sarcastic response, I caught motion from the corner of my eye. My mother was hovering in the doorway. She was wearing a flowing dress crafted from lilac silk, and her expression was built from sorrow. She didn't need to speak for me to know her thoughts. I'd always been close with her. She wants me to go with him. "All right," I sighed, shrugging sharply. "When do we fly out?" Satisfied, and like he'd expected to win this debate, he slid his phone into the open once more. "Pack your things right now. We're leaving in the morning." Chapter 3. Hawthorne. Dad had already reserved the seats. He'd been positive I'd go with him. I should have been more sour about that. It was hard to be pissed off, though, when I came face to face with my mother the next day. The cool blue of the morning turned her tanned skin lifeless. Disturbingly, she reminded me of why I was flying to Torino. "Be patient with him," she said, pulling me into a hug. Her nose rubbed in my hair the way it always did when she held me close. "He's lost his brother, Thorne. A brother he hasn't seen since before he met you." Her arms tightened around me. "Would you feel nothing if one of your siblings died?" I started to answer. Then I breathed out, returning her hug. "You don't have to convince me I'm going with him, even if it's just to be the shoulder he needs to rub his tears and snot into." She pulled away, trying to whack me in the arm, but I just hugged her again so she couldn't. "Relax, Ma, it'll be fine. Are you sure you don't want to come along?" She chanced to look over her shoulder at the car, where my father and our driver were waiting for me. "Maverick wants me to continue to entertain my family. We were hoping to strengthen our connections with them. We really need their help, especially with all the extra security we've had to hire, and don't get me started on how many of our business partners have abandoned us to go work with the Valentines." It made sense. We'd lost most of our hold over this city. New faces were rolling into our territory every day. Our enemies, even the smaller ones, were happy to take advantage of our weak spots. If my mother's father, the head of the Cassava family, could help us out, it would be a great relief. Never let anyone tell you it doesn't pay to marry into the local mafia. I lifted my suitcase. "I'll see you soon." "Take lots of photos," she said, following me out the door. "Aren't you going to say bye to Dad?" "I already did. If I do it again, I'll just start bawling." She clutched her hands to her bosom. "Remember the pictures, and no getting into trouble, okay?" "Mom, promise me." Laughing, I tossed my bags into the trunk of the parked black Mercedes. "I promise I won't get into any trouble that isn't worth it." With my phone loaded with music, I was able to relax through the first hour of the flight. Dad sat next to me in relative silence. He flipped through the movie screen on his chair, never settling on any one video. He left each half-finished. "We should talk." It was obvious, and that made it painful. I'd never talked for long stretches with Maverick, not unless it was about money. Business talk. Nothing deeper. What if he gives me the cold shoulder when I try to make conversation? But even as I wondered this, I was already sliding my earbuds aside. We were as alone as possible in first class. The white noise of the engines and air filling the cabin ensured us privacy. Shifting, I stretched a bit, doing my best with my body language to tell him, "If you want to talk, now is the time." I yawned once, twice. He didn't bite. Drumming my fingers on my thighs, I took a long breath to steady myself. "Just ask him." I glanced askew. He met my gaze. Hey," I said. "I'll just come right out and say it. Are you all right?" His thick eyebrows inched lower. "I'm fine." "Sure, but, well, come on." Laughing uneasily, I sat deeper in my chair. The ceiling was suddenly very interesting. "Don't make this hard for me." "You think this is hard for you?" he whispered. Cold, then heat, slid up my spine. I knew that tone the way I knew the fit of an old pair of jeans. He'd done a spectacular job searing fear into my neurons since before I could walk. As much as I didn't want to feel nervous, as much as I mentally knew I was a full-grown man and not a child he could bully, there was an automatic response in my psyche I could never shake. "Listen," I said warily. Maverick hesitated, purple tinting around his eyes. like the blood vessels there were doing all they could to keep his anger at bay. Amazingly, he'd deflated back into his seat. It was so fast, I felt whiplash. This isn't easy. I'm still trying to figure out how to handle this. But you sitting there, pretending you want to help, isn't going to fix my mood. All right? My nod was curt, loud and clear. We sat in a long, suffocating quiet. The pressure in my skull was immense. I knew it wasn't just from being thousands of feet in the air. This thick, suffering silence was familiar for us both. I'd been ridiculous to think I could talk to him about his feelings. I heard his seatbelt's buckle clink. He was turning toward me, and with the window outside showing an endless blue world, his irises leached the color from the sky. I do have something I want to talk about. My pulse climbed. Okay, I'm all ears. Hester and I didn't part on good terms. The laughter that exploded from me was born from startled relief. I'd predicted something worse. It was good to be wrong. I could have guessed that. You've never mentioned his name before. He faltered, like he was checking his own memory. No, I guess I never told you. Never told you. As in he'd told someone else and forgotten it wasn't me. Probably Costello then. He'd been our father's perfect pet for a very long time. After their relationship had soured, Maverick hadn't played favorites any longer. We were all equal fuck-ups. You've never explained why you left Torino, just that it wasn't safe there for you any longer. Sinking deeper into the airline seat, my father shut his eyes. I noticed all the fine lines that crept toward his temples. I was 20 when my father fell ill. As the oldest, everyone expected me to be crowned once he passed. It was how it was done. How it would be done if we all lived there, I thought. I imagined my older brother. He was stiff, humorless, and often frightening. He'd have made a perfect king. Even Cain, my younger brother, had a sort of air to him that felt regal. Either of them would have been fit to rule. Far better than I could have hoped to be. Not that I'd have ever wanted such a job on my shoulders. Maverick sighed through tight lips. Hester came to me in private. He'd always had a jealous streak, but I didn't expect him to bluntly lay out his threat. The boy I'd taught marksmanship, or slipped away to hunt deer in the forest. That same boy told me what he would do if I dared to accept my rightful claim to the throne. Can you guess? I'd been holding my breath. I let it out, clearing my throat. Let him have the crown, or he'd kill you. My father's chuckle held no joy. That's right. I know this story ends with you running off to cozy little Rhode Island, meeting Mom, making a bunch of babies and all that jazz, but I have to know. Why didn't you stand up to your brother? I'd never known my father to back down from a bully. He looked at me with such disdain that I leaned backward. His threat was treason, Thorne. If I'd told anyone, they'd have killed him. How could I choose the crown over my own kin? Greed makes people do all sorts of awful things. But I didn't say it. What happened between my brother and me, he said. It's not something siblings should ever suffer. Family is worth more than wealth or power. After a moment, he said very softly, I never wanted him to die. But now it's happened anyway, and I don't have a damn idea how. Your inside man, he has no details? He shook his head. None. Hesitating, he fixed me with a hard look. Thorne, I have no clue what we're about to walk into. It's been almost 40 years since I was last in Torino. My country and its people will be different. I don't know who will remember me, or if I should want them to. You have to be cautious." My smile tugged upward at an angle. "Come on, I'm always careful." He looked out the small window at the empty sky and didn't reply. As we descended the escalator toward the luggage area, I spotted a man holding a sign with the name Maverick B on it. My father waved. Then the mustached stranger helped us gather our things and cart them into the trunk of a massive black town car. When we were inside, the doors slamming shut, I said under my breath, "Are we not going by either of our surnames here?" His jaw tensed. "Don't be stupid, son. I'm not announcing to the world that we're here. Not until I know more about the situation." "Okay, and who's going to give us all the details?" He pulled out his phone and started to type. "An old friend. Hopefully they're still a friend, anyway. It's possible he won't even take the message I sent ahead of us and want to meet me. Or he will, and he'll plan an ambush." Lolling my head back, I spread my knees. "I sure feel comfortable about all our weapons being dismantled in cases in the trunk right now." "Relax. Rush and Donnie are armed and waiting at our hotel." That made my head snap forward. "They're here? Are you planning to keep all the details of our little trip to yourself?" "It wasn't an important detail. I want my gun back in my hands as soon as we get to our rooms." He turned off his phone. "Fine. Anything else?" "If you're taking requests, I'd also like a stiff drink after that flight." "It's 9 in the morning, Thorne." "Sure, here. I'm still on East Coast time." "Is everything a damn joke to you?" he growled, facing me in the suddenly small car. Our driver had closed the partition between him and us. I glanced at it, then back to my dad. "I'm just trying to ease the tension. Maybe you should try to take this more seriously instead." Shoving his phone into his pants, he draped a thick arm over the back of the seat next to him. "After everything that went down last winter with the Valentines, I was starting to think you could be trusted with more responsibility. You're proving me wrong with your little games." "Yeah?" I laughed. "It's like you forgot you were the one who asked me to come on this trip. I never asked to be a part of your reunion." The car slowed to a halt. We'd arrived at the hotel. "You forget your place, son." "My place is back home with 2 girls in my lap and some whiskey in my stomach." I shoved my way out of the car, slamming the door behind me. Why the hell had I agreed to torture myself by spending so much time alone with my dad? In my sympathy over his loss of his brother, I'd forgotten how good he was at getting under my skin. Seconds after we checked into the Reisenberg, Donnie, our longest-employed bodyguard, hustled to my father's side. "Upstairs," he whispered, handing us a key card. "He's waiting for you in my room." "He?" Maverick asked. "You don't mean he came alone?" Donnie shrugged. "I was surprised, too. He said he didn't need anyone to protect him from you, though." A rare smile spread on my dad's lips. "Of course he said that. Crazy asshole." Glancing at me, he motioned to follow him to the elevator. Quick enough, the doors parted back open with a crystal-clear ring of a bell, depositing us on the 4th floor. The hallway was long, the rugs green and yellow, the doors solid metal. The Reisenberg Hotel was a mix of contemporary and old school, like they'd made upgrades on top of the fading pieces, but never actually replaced them. New polish was apparently good enough. I could see, at the end of the hall, a door with 2 men standing outside. Both watched us approach. I knew these men. They were all ours. Dad had brought plenty of backup. Maybe too much, if there was only 1 man inside the room waiting for us. Using Donnie's card, my father opened the door. It was a small room, harder to hide people. A smart precaution. Big windows faced the city of Marine below, the sun turning all the wallpaper a washed-out white. Standing beside the queen bed, making it look like a twin in comparison, was a huge man with a reddish beard. It faded into hair darker by a shade or two, the thick pieces cropped tight by his ears. He was dressed in tan pants, heavy boots, and a dark blue shirt with the top 3 buttons clasped shut. It covered his arms, straining to hold his muscles in. He came close, sizing me up. "I'll be damned. He looks just like you, Mav." I nodded my eyebrows. Usually people say compliments when they first meet. Helps them get along. He stared. Then his huge chest swelled as he laughed. "No doubt about it. Same sharp tongue as you, too." He thrust his hand at me. "I'm Glenn Finbar, head of the Royal Guard. Your dad and I grew up together." Maverick leaned out into the hall, said something to the men, then shut us inside. "It's good to see you, Glenn." He faced my father, his green eyes flashing. "Damn near 40 years, Mav. I didn't know if you were dead or if you'd abandoned the throne like Hester claimed. You know how hard it was guarding over him, staring at the back of his vulnerable neck, wondering every day if he'd killed you, and—" "No," Maverick said, cutting him off. "He never harmed a hair on my head. I won't have his memory tarnished." It was a chore not to speak up. Was my father still covering for Hester, even when it no longer mattered? Glenn had a doubtful squint scrunching his forehead into deep grooves. He sighed, looking around at the men in the hotel suite. "We'll need to prepare an entourage. The people closest to the former king and current queen will want to be informed that Maverick Fredrickson has returned. I don't want everyone to know," my father said. "Not yet." Glenn lifted an eyebrow. "Fine, but those involved with the funeral will need this info. Otherwise, you won't be allowed in to see his body." His body. That phrase made me swallow. I saw my father tense, his fingers curling at his hips. Maverick gathered himself, standing to his full height. "How did he die?" "Of course," Glenn mumbled. "You wouldn't know. He grew ill around 3 years ago, but last year was when his health rapidly declined." "He was only 56, my father said solemnly. Glenn tossed a fleeting look at me. "Youth doesn't protect us from death. Hester had bone cancer. It's amazing he made it this long. He was a fighter," Maverick said. He lifted his chin high, his tone clean and clear, and I recognized it as his way of signaling that the subject was changed. "Give me a rundown of the country on the whole. Marine looked busy when we arrived. How are the farther, more rural areas?" "It's not good," Glenn said flatly. "Hester and Austere have been bleeding Torino dry between high taxes and personal loans. The farmers are furious, food is far too expensive to grow, and almost no one can afford to purchase it." They talked with their heads together. If 40 years had passed, it wasn't obvious. These two conversed as comfortably as any friends. The longer they spoke intensely about Torino and the pieces of it I didn't know, the more I sensed that I didn't belong here. They weren't including me because I had nothing to contribute. "If you're going to discuss corn and cows," I said, backing toward the door, "I think I'll get the cliff notes later." Glenn folded his arms over his massive chest. "Not interested in the place your ancestors lived and breathed?" My father's scowl pulled his jaw tight. "It's fine. Hawthorne was never one for political lessons. Or lessons of any kind, honestly." His dig pricked at my pride. But I'd been down this road over and over before. Dad didn't care if I learned anything about Torino. He just wanted to make me listen to him talk. That was his way. He needed to be the voice of knowledge, of authority. That was how we'd spent my youth, him dictating and me enduring. As a child, I'd been perfect at zipping my mouth and tuning in to his every syllable. I was convinced that if I gave him the ear he wanted, he would reward me with love. Back then, I was too naive to know the most important lesson he'd eventually teach me. How replaceable I was. Chapter 4. Hawthorne. Everything smelled like clean salt. Torino was a very beautiful coastal country. Our hotel was situated in the center of the main city, and still it didn't take much walking before I saw the white tips of boats on the horizon. When I followed the natural slope of the streets toward the water, I turned onto an area that was open enough for me to glimpse the castle in the distance. It spiraled up toward the clouds like it had every right to be part of the sky. The tiles were a rich blue, the stone polished and white. That's where Dad grew up, where I would have too if he'd stayed here. Picturing myself running around the city, swimming in the sparkling ocean below the statues carved into the hillside. It was appealing. Who wouldn't want to grow up in such a place? As lovely as it all was, the people didn't seem so happy. Many grim faces eyed me as I walked down the streets. I was astounded by the amount of homeless people crouched in the shadows of buildings. There were whispers about whether the country would get better or worse with the king dead. "Not like the Queen will do anything," a wrinkled man confided to another as they leaned on a stone wall I was following. "Haven't even seen her face in a year." I wanted to listen more, but I couldn't do it without being obvious. If I find a spot to sit by a busy corner, I'll overhear things for sure. Plus, I was getting hungry after exploring for so long. The day was getting away from me, and everything around here smelled amazing. The predominant language of Torino was English. However, I caught a bit of French here and there. The first cafe I spotted was called Gull's Boulangerie. This whole area was saturated by a Parisian feel. It made me like it even more. "Help! Stop him! Someone stop him!" The beat of my heart went erratic. Twisting, I watched as an older lady pointed after a man who was rushing away in broad daylight. He had a very purple purse clutched in his grip. "Help!" she screamed again. "Thief!" Say what you will about my lax attitude, I'd never stand idly by while someone literally screamed for help in my face. My shoes pounded on the cobblestones as I closed in on the purse snatcher. I didn't see the young woman who caught up with him first, not until she slammed into his shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. She straddled his back, one hand in his hair, the other squeezing at the wrist that clutched the stolen purse. Her shoulder-length hair covered her face as she leaned in to brace herself and hold the man down. It created a cinnamon curtain, allowing only a hint of her soft features. Through her creamy-looking tight blouse, I could see lean muscles in her arms flexing. Her breasts swelled up and down with her rapid breathing. Her poise screamed, "Don't mess with me." I can't lie. It was crazy sexy. "Police!" she shouted, whiskey-colored eyes darting around at the crowd. "Get the police!" Everyone acted at once. It shook me out of my daze. Jumping forward, I helped grapple with the struggling man just as two officers in dark gray uniforms stormed onto the scene. "What happened here?" The one who asked was portly, too much stubble frosting his flabby neck. The young woman stepped away, letting the police take over. "He stole her purse," she said, pointing at the older lady, who had finally caught up to us. Breathing heavily, the older woman nodded to the cops. Together, the police scooped the man up. I folded my arms, amazed at how quickly it was all resolved. But then, my attention was really on the woman who'd tackled the thief in the first place. Now that we were standing, I could see that she was shorter than I, and shorter than the other men who'd stood around and done nothing while someone yelled for help. She faced me. It made me stand more upright, like my heart had pumped a wave of air that inflated my limbs. I already liked her for her bravery, but I was startled by her simple, clean prettiness. Not a sex pot, and not girly pink, but with a comfortable in her own skin kind of style. I was liking Torino better by the second. "Ah!" she hissed, bending down to inspect the scrape on her left leg. "Here," I said, helping her sit in a chair at one of the Gull's outdoor tables. "I'll be right back. Get a coffee or an espresso or whatever you like." She started to argue. I was already hurrying across the street. I'd noticed the small chemist shop earlier. It was, as I'd hoped, much like a pharmacy in the States. I worked quickly to buy what I needed, grateful that the store took my credit card. I'd traveled abroad before, but I was usually more prepared. I'd have grabbed some local currency from the hotel if I hadn't been so eager to get away from my dad. The woman watched me as I jogged back to where she was sitting. "Hi again," I chuckled. I'd only bought one thing. I pulled it from my back pocket. Peeling off the plastic backing, I pressed the adhesive bandage onto her knee. My fingertips connected with her skin. It was smooth as buttercream. Touching her sent a spark down to my lower belly. Blinking, she wiggled her leg and bent to look closer. "Is that the Hulk?" I grinned wide. One superhero deserves another. She was fixated on the blue and green bandage, but it was like she wasn't really seeing it. It went on like that for a bit, her staring quietly, me kneeling by her shoes. I didn't mind being so close to her. Finally, her pink lips curled into a soft smile. "Thank you." "It's nothing." "You're wrong," she whispered, meeting my eyes. I froze under her seriousness. "You helped me when you didn't have to. That's no small thing." Tiny piano keys tapped one by one through my chest. I knew this tune. I was no stranger to desire. Standing, I dusted my jeans off. "I'm Thorne, by the way." "Nova," she said, watching me like she was paranoid about something. I flashed my most winning smile. "Nova. Nice name." I scanned the bare table. "You didn't get that coffee, huh?" She was still studying me, as if I were the most interesting creature on the planet. Then she crossed her legs, a hint of her smile coming back to roost. "You were so quick I had no time." "Guess we'll have to fix that." "Guess we will." She laughed without a flicker of self-consciousness. "After all that action, I could use a stiffer drink." "I think they only serve coffee and tea here," I said, pointing at the chalkboard sign by the door. "Know a good place with some hard alcohol, where a cute guy and a cuter girl can get to know each other better?" I expected her to blush, but instead she looked down the road. "I do." "Lead on." I gestured at her knee. "Or I can carry you, if you like." I'd certainly like it. That time, she did flush pink. Her teeth bit down on her bottom lip softly, and the sight made my jeans painfully tight. "I'm fine. I can walk." Her injury didn't slow her down. Together, we strolled the cobbled lane, heading up a steep slope until we came to a little building with an outdoor balcony. "What a view," I murmured, shading my eyes and staring out at the blue waves. "Right?" She sat down at the tiny table. It was so small that when I joined her, our legs accidentally touched. Nova didn't pull away. Smiling, she played with the salt shaker. "I've always loved Torino." "Do you live here?" "Oh, no." She set the salt shaker down and pulled her hands into her lap. "I just travel here most summers." "It's my first time," I said. "It's nicer than I imagined." "What did you imagine?" Stretching my arm over the back of my chair, I regarded the ocean. The boats rocking gently in the docks resembled white flower petals in a puddle. It was picturesque, quiet, nothing like the tragedy my father's cautionary words had conjured up over the years. He'd told me little about Torino, or about his bad blood with his brother, but I'd known that our heritage was dangerous, that I was meant to keep my royalty a secret. I'd also known he used his history as a way to leverage power and favors. He'd certainly used it to help my mother's family agree to give him whatever he needed so he could grow his own empire. All the whispers I'd picked up while he confided in my older brother, like I wasn't able to hear, like I wasn't even there, they'd made being royalty sound like a curse. Thorne? Blinking, I realized I'd been stewing in my thoughts too long. Sorry, I chuckled. Think I'm still adjusting to the time zone change. Nova was staring at me, with her eyes wide and glassy. I knew that look. I hated that look. I'm fine, I said quickly, motioning for the waiter to come over. Let's get those drinks we talked about. Taking the little paper menu, I ordered myself a grilled cheese and marveled at the price, even if it was easy for me to afford, as well as a stiff whiskey on ice. Nova didn't even read the menu. She handed it back and asked for a glass of Moscato and their soup of the day. The drinks came quickly. Here, I said, lifting my glass up. Cheers to strangers becoming friends. She grimaced, confusing me. You okay? Nova shook herself, sending her hair tumbling so it caught the light. The strands glowed like molten gold with the sun behind her. I'm fine, really. Her glass went up, every hint that she'd been shocked going away. To new friends. Clinking my glass against hers, I took a quick sip. It burned perfectly going down. As I placed my drink on the table, I spotted something in the street nearby. A police car, different from the ones in the States, but universally recognizable. It wasn't the same cops as earlier, but it made me think about the altercation. What will happen to him? I asked. The pickpocket? Her chin tucked lower. Torino has severe laws. He'll be charged a fine, then locked up for 5 years. I clutched my glass tighter. All that because he snatched a purse? It's the law. Still seems extreme to me. Nova tipped her glass up, sipping. All right, how would you do it? Excuse me? Her eyes twinkled. You talk like you know how to run this country. So what would the punishment be for the man that was arrested today? I'm not the kind of person who knows how to run anything, believe me. I don't. Believe you, I mean. She twirled her glass and finished it off. Her cheeks looked like candy apples. You give off this natural authority. My grin hurt my face. Go on. She held my wicked stare for a heartbeat. I was shooting mental pictures at Nova that were quite dirty and very authoritative. She sat up like she'd been pricked in the ass with a fork. Had my filthy thoughts penetrated her imagination? Just tell me how you'd punish him, she insisted. Under the table, I slid my shoe against her ankle. I loved how her breath quickened at my touch. Nova, I said thickly, feeling the alcohol and our chemistry. You're really hung up on punishments. If all you want is for me to spank you, we can go somewhere and take care of that. The candy apples in her cheeks melted until her whole throat was glowing. That, she started to sputter. I'm asking you a serious question, Thorne. I'd rather drink more and take it easy. This is the kind of conversation I was trying to avoid when I went out this morning. Her head tilted, sending her reddish hair tumbling beautifully over her shoulder. I knew she was going to ask what I was referring to, and I didn't want to explain because, so far, I'd avoided all talk about the funeral or who I was, or why I was really here. Fine, I said hurriedly. Okay. Give me a second and I'll answer. Nova seemed pleased. The waiter arrived with her soup, and she plucked a piece of bread out of the basket, then dipped and chewed patiently. I stared at my sandwich as it was set down. How unfair it was that I couldn't will it to transform into an entire bottle of whiskey. Then I'd be drunk and not answering deep questions about morality. Life would be simpler if you could wish away your problems. Furrowing my brow, I lifted my eyes. It would depend on why he stole the purse. How do you mean? Hefting the sandwich in my hands, I said, if he had a family to feed, if he himself was starving, a man who steals for greed should be punished, but a man stealing to help others shouldn't be thrown in a cell to rot. Nova was half smiling. How noble of you. You'd be the Robin Hood of kings if you made the laws here. Heat rocketed up my neck. Well, I don't, and I wouldn't want to. Someone else can handle all that work. She made a small, soft sound, the kind I wanted to hear in private, and over again. Her hands crossed under her chin, and her tight white top, she melded with the clouds behind her. She could have been a figurehead on a ship, inspiring men to adventure, or leading them home to their warm beds. We stayed like that for a while. I ate quietly, enjoying the fresh air, and perhaps the first silence in my life that didn't feel uncomfortable. Nova made this too easy. I didn't mind. It was refreshing. Different. See that? She said, pointing at one of the boats. That's the Sandpiper, one of the oldest ships around. It doesn't go out anymore, but it's full of really great artifacts, maps, preserved history. You'll have to check it out. I chuckled. I've seen boats. I live by the ocean back home. Yes, she said defensively, but not that boat. So you will. My chuckle became a helpless laugh. And what else will I see while I'm here? Nova cupped her own cheeks. The castle rose gardens are famous. Oh, and then there's this set of statues on the far side of town, been there for 100 years. There were stars in her eyes. Her energy was contagious. You really do love this place, I whispered. Well, I hope you'll show me everything you can before we part ways. She froze, like she realized where we were and who we were. People who'd only met an hour ago. People who knew nothing of each other. I didn't even know where she lived, just that it wasn't here. Nova considered me long and hard. The stars in her eyes had been replaced by something that burned hotter, brighter, impossibly so, as she said, "Come with me." We slid carefully along a rough path that curled around the cliffs on the far edge of the city. The sharp wall of the cliff on our right rose, then lowered. I could glimpse the purple crest of the waves where they brushed the lowering sun. Every minute with Nova blew by faster than seemed fair. She'd clearly been this way many times. Her glittering flats dodged holes and patches of sand. In her confidence, she moved too fast. "Watch it," I said, catching her by her elbow when her heel went out from under her. Bracing herself in my arms, Nova gaped up at me. "Sorry, I lost my balance." Gently, lingering with my fingers wrapped around her upper arms, I steadied her. The narrow path pushed our bodies ever closer. "Don't be sorry. I'll take any chance to catch a pretty girl that I can get." Her laugh echoed, bouncing off the rocks. "Come on, we're almost there." "You still haven't said where there is, or what it—" Trailing off, I rounded the last corner. The path spilled out onto a flat section of beach that was white as bleached bone. It was surrounded by glassy, polished rocks that curved up in layered pieces, like a giant hand was cupping us. "What's this?" I asked, marveling at the beauty of the land. It had been eroded by the waves over what must have been millennia. I wanted you to see my favorite spot. I thought maybe you'd understand my feelings about Torino if you did. She reached for my hand. Smiling, I let her take it, enjoying the tight warmth of her grip. Nova guided me down to the soft sand, then farther, until we were perched on the rock edge and able to see the waves foaming only a few feet below. We were sheltered, but the salty spray sometimes flicked up into our faces when a particularly huge wave rolled into place. "It's beautiful," I said, and though we'd stopped moving, I kept hold of her hand. "Earlier," she whispered, "I asked what you imagined this country would be like. You never answered me." We were standing shoulder to shoulder. The setting sun had fallen low enough that it looked like a giant egg yolk sinking into the water. Crimson light cast Nova in a halo that made her auburn hair into bright embers. My hand unlinked from hers. She ran her fingertips across my palm as it did. Gently, I captured her chin with two of my fingers, turning her toward me. I thought it would be terrifying here. Her skin was warm. Pulling her closer made it a furnace. I thought I'd hate it. Her tongue glided over her plump bottom lip. "And you don't?" "How could I? This place allowed me to meet you." In my shadow, her eyes were like polished rocks at the bottom of the sea. There were a million puzzles buried in her pupils. Suddenly, I thought she looked incredibly sad. Her expression was full of multiple lifetimes that stretched on, and the old rocks around us only enhanced this vision. My chest constricted around the buzzing of my heart. Another second, and I would have crumbled under her stare. Where was all this pain coming from? Finally, her eyes closed. Finally, I brushed my mouth on hers. "Thorne," she whispered on my vibrating skin. Her tongue moved curiously, testing me, and I let her. Nova was both confident and uncertain. She touched me like she kept expecting me to evaporate into thin air. There was an eagerness to her palms on my shoulders, a wonderment in how she experienced me. Waves crashed in my ears with an insistent rhythm. The heavy noise mixed with my breathing mirrored my desire to smash myself on Nova until I left the same impression on her that the water had eroded into the cliffs. But for everything I gained in this long-lasting kiss, I wondered why I felt like I was missing something. Chapter 5. Hawthorne. The cathedral rose into the pale pink sky. In the distance, I could hear the song of seabirds. No matter where you were in this city, the coast wasn't far away. A long path made from steps cut straight into the rock led toward the cathedral. It wound tighter the closer to the building I got. There was a large crowd gathered around, but all of them were prevented from getting close to the funeral by the many guards. Each step was staffed by a man who openly displayed a rifle. Some of these guys were ours, but the rest, as far as I could tell, were all members of the Royal Guard. Who else could they be, with their stiff-shouldered blue shirts, their embellished golden buttons down the front? At the sight of my fast approach, one of them frowned. "Hold up," he said, blocking my way. "It's fine." Glenn stepped into view higher on the steps. He waved me forward. "He's got clearance." The unnamed guard's frown shifted into a confused, open-mouthed gape. I felt him eyeing me with curiosity. "You heard him," I said, pushing by. "Let me through." Glenn's shadow slid over me. Behind his ear, the early sun had begun to show its face. "My condolences," he said gravely. His pity didn't sit right with me. "I didn't know my uncle," I said quickly, like I wanted it to be clear no one had to feel sorry for me. I wasn't suffering. Even the strangers surrounding the cathedral, even these nameless guards, all of them had more right to feel sad than I did. My father's friend hesitated, then looked away. After that, no one stopped me. At the top of the stairs, I smoothed my black suit. The huge door was partly open. I nudged my way inside. The entry was stuffed with so many flowers that the floral smell burned my nostrils. Through a second set of arches was a welcoming glow. The interior of the church took my breath away. Tall candelabras had been arranged beyond the threshold, lighting up the long black banners draped from ceiling to floor on the walls. Each of them was embroidered with a simple design. When I saw it, I placed a hand on the right side of my ribs. On the banners was the same symbol that had been etched into my flesh the day I'd turned 18. The crown was a rich crimson, the edges sharp, knife-like tips pointing toward the sky. Stained glass curved overhead in a gorgeous display of skill and piety. The pews that flowed toward the front of the room were carved from burnished oak. There were a number of people lining the walls and seats. Everyone was dressed in stark black as a sign of respect. Searching the wide room for my father, I saw another familiar face first. She would have been easy to miss, but for the fact that she was staring right at me. Nova's hair was wrapped in a net-like veil pinned to her tightly wound bun. The long-sleeved dress hid her curves and most of her ringing hands. But nothing hid her wide eyes. What the hell was she doing here? The people around her swayed. More eyes were on me now. I knew them, too. After all, I'd sat down with the Valentines just 6 months back in an attempt at flimsy peace. Now they were here. And Nova was with them. In a gut punch that made me ill, I remembered who she was. It was strange that I'd forgotten, but the woman I'd met yesterday was nothing like the shy, mousy girl who'd sat with her family as we talked about how to go forward without trying to murder each other. That Nova Valentine hadn't left an impression on me. This one had. What had changed her so much in such a short time? "Thorne," a feminine voice said. Twisting, I stared at my mother in her thick swirls of dark lace. "Mom?" I asked, coming forward and taking her hands. "What are you doing here?" She embraced me. Her cheeks were wet from tears. "I'm weak. I flew out soon after you and your father. Lulabelle offered to stay behind and help, though I'm not sure she'll even try to work out any new deals. You know how she is, but screw the business. I couldn't handle the idea of him facing this without me." She placed her hand on the middle of my back, guiding me deeper into the church. "I should have stopped by your hotel room, but I arrived after midnight and hated to wake you. I knew I'd see you this morning. Here." I was barely listening. It took everything I had to stop staring at Nova. I felt her eyes on me as I approached the lower pews. My mind was jammed. I kept playing that meeting on repeat. I'd met Nova before. Even if I'd forgotten, I doubted she had. Why hadn't she reminded me about it? The anxious threads of paranoia were abruptly chopped when I lifted my head to see what was at the front of the church. Sitting on a low platform was a shiny coffin covered in gold filigree. It was so saturated in color that my father was easier to spot than normal. He, too, was all in black. It made him seem like a shapeless shadow from behind. I watched him as he gazed down on his brother. It hit me then. The last time they'd seen each other, Hester had been alive. He'd been so much more than this emaciated corpse. Ice traveled the length of my spine. A bomb had been rolling in my chest since I walked into the cathedral. It exploded until I thought it would fill up every crevice in my body. 2 siblings forced apart by greed. This was a tragedy. This was beyond cruel. I felt grateful to my father. Even if he'd fled into exile to save his own skin, he'd prevented his children from enduring the same game of royal chess that he'd grown up with. On the sidelines, I caught motion. Nova was leaning forward from the straight-backed row of her family. Her perceptive eyes were stuck on me, like she was waiting for me to cry, like she expected me to. My nose burned as I sucked in air. On stiff legs, I headed over to my father. My mother grabbed my elbow, pulling me into a seat beside her. "Leave him," she pleaded. I didn't resist her firm grip, but her command broke me out of my stupor. "Why the fuck are the Valentines here?" I hissed into her ear. She looked straight ahead. "We'll talk about it after. This isn't the time." I burned with a wild need to confront them, to stalk over there and stare down Curtis Valentine and his whole brood, to ask them what their connection was to Hester, to Torino, to ask her what she was up to. Nova, I thought, my hands tightening into fists in my lap. Were you playing with me yesterday? Did you kiss me as part of some trap? I hated not knowing. I prided myself on staying ahead of the game. But I hadn't just stumbled. I'd fallen flat on my face. My father approached us. He dropped bonelessly on the opposite side of my mother. The priest approached the casket. Maverick was staring that way, his eyes dry, his skin ashen. I saw my mother take his hand. He clutched it. As the priest went on about life, death, and the power of heaven, the small crowd made quiet sniffling sounds. A high, keening cry soon started from a corner. There was a woman covered head to toe in black silk and a nearly opaque veil. She was sobbing, hugging herself. My eyes narrowed when Curtis Valentine's wife, Valencia, hurried over to talk to her. "Austere Fredrickson," my mother whispered in my ear. "The king's widow." I felt a tickle of suspicion seeing Valencia holding Austere close, talking to her in a soothing way. Their behavior was too familiar. How did they know each other? How did the Valentines know anyone in this country? They were a Boston Mafia family. Dangerous, powerful, rich like mine. But clearly, that wasn't all. There was more happening here. I was determined to understand everything. Chapter 6. Hawthorne. "They're snakes," my father said. He leveled his glare on me, and even knowing his anger wasn't for me but the Valentines, I stepped back. "Everything they've been up to makes sense now. Tell me." I bit the words in two, narrowing my eyes in Nova's direction. She had the grace to turn away. My father led me and my mother farther into the cathedral. He didn't want anyone else to hear. "Glenn brought me up to speed yesterday. It seems that my brother fell in love with the Queen around 30 years ago. She was visiting with her family, with her sister, Valencia." That information made me dizzy. Austere is Valencia Valentine's sister? Crinkling her lace-gloved hands into a ball, my mother scowled. "They've been involved with Torino since the start. That's how they knew who you were, Maverick," she said, looking at her husband. Back in the States, my father had changed his surname from Fredrickson to Badd, so our royal blood would remain a secret. Not many knew who we really were, though telling a girl that you're a prince in hiding is easy mode for a good time, if you like things easy anyway. Maverick's nod was ponderous. The real issue is that 10 years ago it became clear that Austere wasn't going to produce an heir. He studied me closely. How much did you listen to what I told you about the rule of succession to the throne? Let's not make this about me. Get to what matters. I want to talk to Nova. His forehead tightened with new stress lines. Hester has no children. His death means that the next in line would be me or Costello, in that order. The stomping in my veins grew into a parade. My mother covered her mouth.
That's why they threatened us, why they kept interfering with our lives. The Valentines were benefiting greatly from Valencia's sister being the queen. They knew she'd be removed from the throne if someone with a better claim appeared.
My mind was working through the details. I felt a bony hand clutch my heart. All this time, they've been worried we'd come back to Torino and take the crown? Maverick was looking over my head. I followed his eyes. The entire Valentine family was watching us from the same wall they'd been lined up against at the start of the funeral. Yes, he said grimly. They've been in the shadows, observing us, knowing this moment was coming. Without an heir, the Valentines have no claim to this kingdom, unless all of us are dead and out of the way, I said. This is what their bullshit truce was all about. They wanted us to stay far away from Torino. They probably thought Dad was aware of the situation and was just biding his time until he could return. And here we are, just like they were afraid of. I was suddenly counting the number of guards in the room. I didn't think the Valentines would do something so rash as to try to kill us in front of an audience, but after learning how long they'd been watching us, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Nova. Why had she spent so much time with me? What was her part in all of this? A firm hand clasped my shoulder. I looked up at Maverick curiously. Come on, he said. It's time for us to find out what they want. We know what they want. They want us dead. My mother gave me a somber look.
They had this whole time to attack us again, and they didn't.
They knew we were on edge, I said, chasing reasons. It'd be suicide to attack us so soon after the mess with Darian and Gina. She reached for me with that familiar pity that I was so sick of. Thorne. All at once, I had to get out of the room. I couldn't stomach a conversation with the Valentines. I was resistant to the idea that talking could solve anything with these people. But mostly, I couldn't face the woman who'd looked into my eyes, held me close, and kissed me, while knowing how stupid I was. Hawthorne! My father kept calling to me as I walked away. Ignoring him, I strode through a side door of the cathedral. I didn't know where it led, just that it would take me away from that stuffy room with its grand art and two-faced people. A small set of steps, weathered by the salty air and coated with moss, took me into a tree-shaded graveyard. The monuments were all huge, many of them decorated with swords or life-size men in crowns. This was the cemetery that Hester would be buried in. The place my corpse will be laid to rest if Maverick takes the crown. The idea made me shiver. I sucked in the clean air like it could heal me. I was too many things at once. I couldn't settle on feeling angry or betrayed or dejected. Pressing a hand to my ribs, I looked up at the foliage spreading over me. A few small birds chirped, darting around and back again, free of the weight of family affairs. Leaning against the cool stone of the cathedral, I shut my eyes and listened to my heart. It sounded like the ocean waves I'd heard last night, when I'd first kissed Nova. She'd been so welcoming, her mouth hungry, pliant and silken. I'd wanted to kiss her until the stars rose above, then beyond that, until they sank into the sea for the last time in eternity. Ocean spray had made her taste like a wonderful secret from the abyss. A treasure discovered by me and only me. "Hawthorne?" a voice called gently, as if it had escaped my daydream. When I opened my eyes, I saw it wasn't my imagination. Nova was standing in front of me. Chapter 7. Hawthorne. The shadow of the church made her look muted and gray. It reminded me of how my mother had appeared the other morning as I'd left our home. That same vibe of empathy, of a sadness that wasn't entirely about me. I didn't move off the wall. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Nova's eyebrows crept higher. "That's not fair. I did tell you. You're the one who didn't recognize me." My mouth fell open. "I was positive you did at first," she went on, staring me down. "The longer you spent with me, the more I realized you had no clue. I was kind of offended." I shook off her mild jab. "I'm bad with faces." It was a lame excuse. I grabbed for another because I desperately needed to make sense of how I had forgotten. "We weren't properly introduced at that meeting. You were sitting at a table with a bunch of your family under pretty tense terms." Her smile grew. It was as tempting as if she'd inched her dress up to expose her thigh. "There were a lot of distractions that day." She pulled in some air, let it out. "It felt awkward to say anything once I knew you didn't recognize me." Damn it, her honesty was disarming me. I wasn't ready to let go of my distrust yet, but talking was so effortless with her. "Sorry I didn't recognize you. In my defense, you don't act at all like you did months ago." That froze her smile in its tracks. "How do you mean?" My memory ran back that day to me. "You were quiet, shy even." I traced her body with a pointed look. "You weren't shy yesterday." She shifted under my scrutiny. "What we did, the way I acted with you, it was something I'd always wanted to do." She clamped her mouth shut, looking at me with her eyes stretched wide, daring me to smother her bluntness with my usual sarcasm. Whatever armor I'd put on had already rusted and fallen away. I softened my tone, wondering if she'd hear my heart thudding. "Are you trying to tell me you've been crushing on me for months?" Nova's fists curled against her dress. Magnetic jolts flew between us as we held each other's stare. It was as if she knew saying more than she had would be dangerous, that it would give me too much power. And she was right. It would. My lower belly was already flaring, my tongue tingling, as I considered that this beautiful girl had been carrying a torch for me. There's nothing sexier than knowing someone wants you. Nothing. "What's going on out here?" A tall figure stepped through the archway. He was wearing a jacket that fell all the way to his thighs, black as tar, and spread open to show off his slim, hard-muscled body. He flicked his honey-colored eyes at me. Larchmont Valentine. Nova's brother. I knew little else about him. His smirk was jagged as he said, "Looks like a party we weren't invited to, Richard." A second man followed Larchmont out of the church. He was beefier, his bronze skin almost the same shade as his closely shaved hair. This guy would have fit right in at a military boot camp. Nova spoke to them without any kindness in her tone. "Why are you here? Is everyone done talking inside?" "Talking?" Larchmont scoffed. He lifted his head so he could stare down his nose at me. I was slouching, which made it easier for him. What bullshit. I'm tired of all the talk. It's not like anyone gives a shit what I want anyway. Weird, I said, smiling at him. You'd think someone with your pleasant manners would be really convincing in a discussion. Richard's wide body moved so he could block me in against the stone wall, partially hiding my view of Nova. He was keeping me from accessing the steps that led down into the grassy cemetery. Larchmont's position cut me off from dodging back inside the cathedral. I was trapped. Larch barely cocked his head. His movements were precise as those of a spider perched on a web, waiting for its prey to land. "Oh," he whispered, "I just remembered that you're the funny one in your family." "Yeah," I grunted, pushing forward until I was standing nose to nose with the gold-eyed man. "That's me, Mr. Funny." I wished I had my damn gun. My decision to be respectful and not bring a weapon to the funeral had been a mistake. "Tell me a joke, funny man," he said. His sneer was so much like his father's. Nova lifted her hands. "Larch, don't." I glanced at Richard, noting how he was tense but unmoving. "I don't tell jokes," I said patiently. "I make clever commentary. Why don't you just cut right to what you want from me?" It was obvious something was pissing Larchmont off. What had they been talking about inside? He skimmed his thumb over his chin. "Impatient little shit. Why did they ever choose someone like you?" My muscles went slack in confusion. Choose me for what? Richard slammed me against the stone wall. Nova shouted in surprise, but after that, I couldn't hear her. I couldn't hear anything but the blood thrumming in my ears, my attention focusing on the big man who'd assaulted me. People assume a lot about my family. When talking about which of my brothers is the most deadly, Costello is the one they usually bet on. And if they don't bet on my older brother, they throw in for Cain. They liked to call him passionate, a nicer word for irrational. No one ever remembers that I've had the same teachers as them, the exact same lessons in weapons, self-defense, even some light MMA. The only difference between us was that I'd always done my best to stay out of trouble. That didn't mean I was weak or lazy. It meant I was smart. Smart people know how to win when the odds are against them. Richard's grip fell away the second I jabbed my knee into his balls. Catching his jacket, I clawed it tight and ducked low. With a great heave, I leveraged him up into the air. I wished I could see how that looked, me balancing this huge ox of a man on my back. He rolled down the steps that led to the grass below, staring at the sky in surprise as he fought to draw in air. I'd knocked the wind out of him. "Look out!" Nova screamed. I spun just in time to take Larchmont's knuckles to my mouth. It was a solid hit that filled my taste buds with the flavor of warm copper. He was leering like he was fucking proud he'd sucker punched me, like he couldn't wait to do it again. Adrenaline cascaded through my body. It numbed any pain or sense of danger. Larch saw the fury in my face, but he wasn't quick enough to decide what to do about it. I had an idea that he was used to hitting men who couldn't fight back. "Come on," I laughed. "Let's fucking go." I snatched the collar of his shirt before he could backpedal out of reach. Stitches ripped. The sound was gratifying. My fist crunching into his nose was even better. He went spinning away from me, half bent over as he clutched at his face. I stayed where I was so I could catch my breath, and because I needed to keep an eye on Richard. Glancing back, I saw the big man was standing now, his hands at his sides like he was a linebacker ready to make a tackle. He'd have to ascend the steps, which would at least give me time to react. "You think you're better than me," Larchmont said, wheezing. I turned enough to eyeball him in disbelief. "Excuse me?" He wiped his nose and stared at the red stains. His glare was full of accusations I didn't understand. "You're not special. You just got lucky. You didn't have to work for anything. Not you, not your dad. You're all just fucking lucky your moms banged the right men." "Stand up," I spit. Blood came out with my saliva. The sight of it made me laugh, a hard bark that turned Larchmont's scowl into an uncertain frown. He didn't know what I would do next. I wasn't sure I knew either. "I'm ready for another round. I didn't quite break your nose, huh? Another solid hit should do it. Let's see if I'm as lucky as you say." My foot slid forward. Larch backed up on shaky legs. "Fight me!" I shouted. "Come the fuck on, let's keep going!" "Thorne!" my father roared. He was standing in the archway of the side door, his lips pulled back over his snarl. Now, that was an expression I was familiar with. Dad's disappointment tasted like undiluted nostalgia. "What the hell is going on here?" "He's insane," Larch said, retreating to my father's side. "Insane?" I laughed. "I thought I was the funny one. Sounds like you're sore you couldn't hold your own against me." I shot a look at Richard. "Neither of you could. Attack me together might increase your chances." Larchmont sniffed loudly, drawing attention to his bloody nose. "You better get your kid under control, old man." Rage swelled hotly in my guts. "He doesn't fucking control me." "Hawthorne," Maverick said. "You aren't behaving appropriately. It's embarrassing." That pulled me up short. These two chuckle fucks come out here and throw some cheap punches, and you're worried that I'm embarrassing you? Richard had made it up the steps, but he was staying at a distance. His expression was only slightly more neutral than Dad's. As for Larchmont, his smugness could have been scraped off his face and served up on toast. "People will think you're a violent fool," Maverick said. "I don't care what anyone thinks about me." I wished my words would make him flinch, but my father showed no sign of being affected. Someone else did, though. Nova's frown spread over her face like a warning. It left me cold and unbalanced. That wasn't the reaction I'd been looking for. "Maybe you should tell him that his actions matter to his future subjects," Larchmont scoffed, his red-tinted teeth showing. There, I spotted guilt in my father's eyes. "What the hell is he talking about?" I asked. "If you'd stayed inside to talk like I told you to, you'd know," he said. "I'm listening now, ears wide open." Was it possible to feel more adrenaline than I had while fighting for my life? The guilt was replaced by stoniness. "This country won't accept you sitting on the throne if you act like a wild animal," Maverick said coolly. Blazing heat traveled over my skin. My adrenaline was washed away by panic, Larchmont's words from earlier echoing in my head. Why did they ever choose someone like you? "And why the hell," I asked cautiously, "would I ever want to sit on the throne?" "Because it's the only choice you've got." It was the first time Richard had spoken out loud, and I wished he'd remained a damn mute. "It's what was decided," he said firmly. To my horror, my father hung his head. "You're joking," I whispered. "Where the hell is this coming from?" "No one else can do this," Maverick said quickly. "Costello has his woman. Kane is already married, like me." Rules of succession. Wait, slow the hell down. I was dizzy, and when I pressed my palm to my temple, everything resonated viciously. "Already married? You expect me to marry someone?" "It's the path to peace with the Valentines," my father said. "A way to bring hope to this country. The only one eligible to wear the crown. is you, son. He's asking me to become the king. I eyeballed him, then the others. Richard looked somber. Larchmont had gone back to scowling. That's why Larch was so pissed at me. I glanced at the church. He's jealous he can't take the crown. He thinks I'm lucky this is happening to me. They were all discussing this behind my back. Nova was wide-eyed, but not surprised. Everyone knew. Her hands were clasped over her lips. Lips I'd kissed. She knew. I wiped the blood off my mouth and stormed off. Chapter 8. Hawthorne. I walked through the church, ignoring my mother as she called out to me, aware of all the eyes but not giving them the satisfaction of my attention. How could this happen? I asked myself that 100 times as I exited the building, marching down the long stairs out front. More eyes burned on me in the open, and I zoned those out too. I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. I didn't care. In minutes, they planned my life out behind my damn back, I thought angrily. They did it without asking my input. Thorne, wait! I felt Nova's presence as she drew closer. I continued walking, my strides getting faster. I'm not going to stop following you, she said. Please just slow down and talk to me. Cars zoomed by on the busy street, forcing me to stop if I didn't want to take several tons of metal to my organs. The knuckles on my right hand were throbbing, reminding me of the fight. My jaw ached as well. I could still taste my own blood. Thorne, she said, softer that time. I looked at her over my shoulder. You should leave. Why would you want to hang out with a violent fool like me? I don't think of you like that, she said. You shouldn't think of me at all. That made her step back. A small movement, but I saw it. Behind her, I spotted 2 people perched on the top step of the church. Even at a distance, I could make out the severe, angular silhouettes of her parents. I gestured at them. You've got people waiting for you. Go do some more talking about me with them. Plan more of my life. The wind tugged at the veil pinned in her hair. She grabbed it, clutching it fiercely, like she needed to hold something. For the record, I didn't realize you had no idea this was going to happen. When you said yesterday that you didn't make the laws and had no plan to, I thought you were being coy. With a wishful, sympathetic look at me, she reached out to brush her fingers over my forearm. I felt her nails through the fabric. And I can't help but think about you. It's just like you said earlier. You've been in my head since we first met. The thick, curdled anger in my blood smoothed away. Even after I'd been picturing her hiding in the shadows, plotting with her family and mine about setting me on the throne, her admission was so damn enticing. Before I could respond, Nova turned and hurried back to the church. When she reached her parents, her mother put a possessive arm around her slim shoulders. I couldn't see Valencia's face well, but Curtis's lips were stretched in a frown. I held his stare for a second. Had he expected me to relish becoming the king? Was he, like his sons, jealous that I'd been born with the right blood, through no effort on my part? I twisted so I could keep walking to the Reisenberg. It wasn't far, the needle tip rising into view as I traveled the few blocks toward it. The doorman did a double take at me as I passed through the automatic glass doors. What's his problem? When I approached my room in the hallway, I noticed a figure standing outside it. He was a broad man, arms crossed like a pretzel over his chest. Rush hadn't been working for my family for very long, but he'd proven to be a good-hearted man. Months back, he'd been a member of a gang called the Deep Shots. We'd put them on our payroll, happy to increase our hold on the city streets of Providence, where most of our less savory businesses were. except the tension between us and the Valentines had caused dissension in the ranks. Many of the deep shots felt they would be better off with another employer, one who would reward them, even encourage them, for getting their hands bloody. They thought no one was off limits, not even innocent young women. But Rush didn't agree. He'd shown his loyalty to my family, risking his life to protect Costello and his girl, Scotch, when letting them die would have been easier. He'd quickly climbed the ranks and ended up as one of our most trusted bodyguards. "Hey," he said, nodding at me as I approached. "How much is he paying you to spy on me?" I asked, sliding out my key card. Rush laughed self-consciously, his nails chafing the side of his thick neck. "Not enough." When I stared at him seriously, he straightened up and cleared his throat. "Kidding. I'm not spying on you. Maverick didn't ask me to. My job, as always, is to keep you safe. Right now, I don't need safety. I need to saturate myself in whiskey." Grabbing my hotel door handle, I unlocked it, the green light flashing. "Alcohol, the cure to all ailments." Rush chuckled, and when I didn't shut the door immediately, he got the hint and followed me inside. I headed to the minibar and yanked out the bottle of Seagram's and a can of ginger ale. After filling one of the glasses that had been left by the staff, I filled a second and offered it to Rush. He took it, but he didn't drink. "How was the funeral?" It was a complicated thing to answer. In my pissed-off state, I was tempted to say, "Oh, got the news I'm expected to become the king of a country I just visited for the first time yesterday." I went the easy route instead. "Grim. Depressing. There was a dead body in the casket. How do you think it went?" He sighed and took a deep drink from the glass in his hands. I lifted my glass high in a quick salute before downing the contents in one gulp. "So nothing else happened?" he asked. Disbelief rocketed through me. "Do you know about the plans for the crown?" If everyone had been told before me, I was going to lose it. Rush knotted up his forehead. "What? I just assumed something must have happened because you've got dried blood on your mouth, man." Touching my jaw, I chuckled dryly. I forgot about that. Now I knew why the doorman had looked so surprised. Yeah, the funeral was a little wild. I refilled my glass, eager to let the warm buzz smother my poor mood. Of course Rush didn't know. Why would anyone have told him what was going on? This political intrigue was meant for the inner circles of my family and the Valentines. But Rush would learn about the plan, as soon as I told everyone a very flat no. I wouldn't agree to this insanity. Did anyone seriously expect me to? Pushing down the part of me that wanted to dissect the dangers of not complying with something so paramount that both my father and Curtis had agreed to it, I opened a second can of ginger ale to mix with the Seagrams. Marriage. Please. What a thought. And to whom? It doesn't matter. "You planning to get shit-faced?" he asked me as I worked on my new drink. Forcing on one of the big smirks I was known for, I swallowed audibly. "I don't get shit-faced. I just have a good time." "What's on the good time agenda?" "First, I need to get out of these depressing clothes." Abandoning my empty glass, I headed over to my suitcase, digging through it for something clean. Under some folded denim, I saw the tip of my pistol. It reminded me of when I'd stumbled back to the hotel last night. How much I'd been floating on a high over kissing Nova. Rush had been outside my room then, too, but he'd just given me a knowing smile and told me he'd left my weapon in my suitcase under some jeans. My father had, amazingly, relayed the message to him about how I wanted my gun at some point after I'd gone wandering off. If only dear old Dad could relay important messages to me directly. I grabbed the gun and took it into the bathroom with the new clothes hooked over my arm. The room was huge, only the best on the family dime, and I was able to drape my outfit on the counter and still have an entire second sink to myself. Leaving the door cracked so I could keep talking to Rush, I ran the water, splashing my face multiple times. It felt disjointedly good to half drown myself. Gasping, I hung my head, watching the droplets spatter rhythmically into the drain. My head came back up. I studied my mouth, noting it was only a little tender. Larchmont hadn't hit me as hard as I'd thought, or maybe I was tougher than either of us guessed. I tugged at the skin under my eyes. There were little red lines snaking through the whites around my irises. I was so damn exhausted. "You alive in there?" I grabbed a towel and dried my skin vigorously. "Just cleaning up." There were drops of dried blood on my shirt. I yanked it over my head and threw it to the floor in a crumpled heap. "Tonight I want to explore what this country has to offer." He chuckled thickly. "You mean see what the girls are like?" The instant he said it, a worm of guilt started to eat through my heart. Thinking about girls made me think about Nova. "Sure," I said, trying to sound chipper. "Don't know how much longer we'll be here. Should get while the getting is good." "Yeah, your father hasn't told me when we're flying home." I heard him pacing the room. Again, I wondered if he was spying on me. But I decided it didn't matter. Let him spy. Let him tell my dad what I was up to. It wasn't like anyone was going to stop me from going out. Though if I lingered, there was a chance my mom or dad would show up and try to corner me. After sliding on some gray jeans that sat low on my hips, I stretched my arms upward with a grunt. My reflection showed off the fit muscles that had remained even with my easy club job. Tattoos ran from my throat down to my wrists and all the way across my torso and stomach. They were on me back to front. I was pretty much wearing a bodysuit made from ink. The only free spots were above my neck, my hands, and my feet. Tattoos were something I'd always been obsessed with. You're never more of a focus to a person than when they're stabbing your skin with needles. I loved the precise pain, the carefulness that tattoos demanded. The art was smooth and dark. I preferred black and gray. The only pop of color was on the right side of my ribs. There, the red and black crown stood out sharply. I touched it, exploring the ridges of muscle where the crown sat. I'd probably pressed my fingers to that small piece of art 1,000,000 times since I'd gotten it when I was 18. It was customary in my family, a tradition, one of the few that my father had brought back with him from Torino. It made me think, again, about the situation I was in. "How is your dad holding up?" Rush asked. I paused in strapping on my gun's holster over my clean white shirt. "He's about as fine as can be expected," I said slowly. "Must be hard for him, losing a brother and all." I yanked the last strap tighter than I'd meant to. "Yeah. Did you get to see her? I mean, I imagine you did." "Who?" I asked, straightening my collar. "The widow. The Queen." Rush stopped walking over the rug. "I got a look at her in the papers, but it was a photo from a year ago. People say she hasn't left the castle in that long." "Didn't take you for much of a gossip reader," I said smoothly. He laughed. "I'm not some meat-headed ox. I do read. Occasionally." Studying myself in the mirror, I brushed my fingers through my hair. "So what did the paper say about our widowed queen?" "A lot of things. I don't get the idea that many people like her. Seems to be some talk about a conspiracy. Guess a lot of people think she might have been the one to kill the king herself." "She didn't seem the type," I said softly. "She just seemed sad." No one was to blame for cancer. I didn't want to tell Rush that I'd already heard the details of how my uncle had died, though, in case it was supposed to be classified. When I came out of the bathroom adjusting my shirt, Rush looked me up and down. "Was she hot?" he asked bluntly. Caught off guard, I gave an uneasy laugh. "I don't know, she's like twice my age. Plus, most of her was covered in black lace. Didn't exactly get a good look at her face." Rush nodded slowly. "I feel pretty bad for the next guy in line that ends up with her." I stopped mid-grab for my jacket. It took me a few seconds to breathe again. "What?" He checked under his fingernails, but made no indication that he knew he'd set my nerves on edge. "That's how it works, right? The king is dead, so the queen's gotta marry another guy and make him the new king. I don't know much about this whole royalty thing, and your dad hasn't really given me any lessons on this system. I just assumed." Picturing myself marrying austere Valentine, a woman I knew nothing about, a woman who was certainly my enemy and my uncle's widow, left me icy. Was Rush right? Was this also part of the plan no one had let me in on? "I don't know how it works either," I mumbled. "I do feel for the poor bastard, though." I grabbed my dark gray jacket off the back of the chair and slid it into place over my gun. After being attacked by Larchmont and Richard, I wasn't going to walk around without protection. Torino also seemed to be in turmoil. A lot of that was probably from the king's death, but I was getting a good, strong idea that these people didn't like austere. The woman I'd just learned I was expected to marry. "I'm going," I said, opening the door. Rush followed me out into the hallway, returning to his station next to my room. "Have fun tonight. Don't get into too much trouble." His advice echoed my mother's from the other day. But this time, I didn't have a charming response. Tonight, if it meant some relief from the pressure that had been put upon my shoulders, I'd seek out all the trouble that I could. Chapter 9. Hawthorne. Evening fell quickly. I killed a lot of time by simply wandering around the city. I strolled along the water. I kept pace with people heading to work or back to their homes. I had no direction, and I was happy to float, seeing where I would land. But when the sun began to set, and a darkness brought the lights out across the overhangs on the buildings, I let instinct lead me toward a more sinister path. I'd worked in my family's strip club for a very long time. I knew where to find the seedy sort of fun that I was chasing. I had a sixth sense for it. Long, skinny alleys threaded through the town, pushing me toward the red light district. This section of the city was nothing like the rest of it. There were no sweet-smelling cafes, no children jumping across aged wood as they chased each other on the docks. It was a whole new dimension. Flickering lights hung above doorways. "Girls, girls, girls," declared one in pink. Another just had a gigantic red blinking X above the door. And God, the women themselves. They posed in the windows or strolled along the sidewalks in lingerie that left their best features on display. They were impervious to the cool evening air. There was no pretense here. That was good. I was done dealing with dishonesty for the day. Outside one of the clubs, I slowed to get a better look. There was a trio of women gathered by the entrance. On the other side of the door was a huge man wearing sunglasses, even though the sun was long gone. He said nothing, acting like some sort of stone gargoyle. One of the women, a redhead with her hair hanging loose and wild, turned to face me. She threw her hips sideways, exaggerating the dip of her waist. "Hey there, honey," she purred. "Looking for something even sweeter?" I inhaled the scent of the air, the familiar energy that reminded me of the dirty dolls and the dent I'd left permanently in the VIP couch. I knew it would be so easy to reach out, take this woman's hand, and let her lead me into the club. I was under no illusion that this would be anything but a transaction. I didn't mind. I liked things to be straightforward. The woman smiled at me, and I found myself thinking so oddly, so out of the blue, of another woman's smile. Nova. I shook myself, trying to clear the clinging memories of that girl, of her connections to my enemies, and how plush and effortless our first kiss had been. "Come on, big boy," she said, taking a step my way. She even looked a bit like Nova. Her tall heels clicked on the cobblestones. When she reached for me, I saw her nails wore a glossy, chipped pink polish. Her hand brushed down my shoulder, across my chest. She must have felt the shape of my gun, because she stopped with her palm right on top. "You seem like a dangerous man. I like them with some bite." "I don't know if I'm dangerous," I said dryly. Swallowing, I tried to dig deep and find the natural, flirty sarcasm that had long been my defining feature. "Just stressed out." She puckered her mouth, cooing at me. "Poor baby." She brushed my sleeve up, revealing my tattoos. "I can definitely help relax you, but it might involve getting you a little more tense first, if you get my drift." Picturing myself, how this evening was about to go, made me feel wooden, and not in a good way. Everything I'd set out to do tonight was abruptly pointless. The idea of hooking up with a stranger didn't appeal. It actually unnerved me. Stepping backward, away from the woman, I caught the flash of disappointment in her eyes. "Sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to waste your time." I turned, nearly running back up the street. I power-walked away until the flashing lights of the clubs stopped bouncing off the street under my feet. What the hell is wrong with me? I didn't owe Nova anything, but I couldn't stop feeling like a piece of shit for considering paying for some play tonight. It didn't make any sense. And besides, even if I did feel guilty, even if I would rather have been around Nova, it didn't matter. She was a Valentine, part of a plot to get me to marry her damn aunt. I didn't have all the information, but I was smart enough to know I was a fucking pawn. Rush had helped me realize the full truth. The Valentines needed me to marry Austere. If I did, they could keep their control of this country. Having the Queen in their pocket would give them access to enormous wealth, I was sure of it. They'd do whatever was necessary to maintain the status quo. That included working with my father to arrange a marriage between the royal blood, my blood, and Austere. And if I refused, I knew they weren't above killing my whole family. I'd been called lazy in the past, unambitious, and it was probably all correct. But I'd never risk the lives of the people I cared about. Wearing the crown and marrying Austere is my only option. Fuck. Frustrated, I walked with my head down low. The constant, low roar of the ocean on my left pulled me along. I hadn't gone far before I saw the yellow hue through the windows of a large ship moored at the docks. The Sandpiper, I thought, remembering the ship that Nova had pointed out to me. Again, my mind was attacked by the memory of her eager kiss. She wanted me to see that ship. Not knowing what else to do to distract myself, I stepped over the old wood until I was standing in front of the huge vessel. Frayed ropes held the ship in place. A long plank was set into the open door in the side. It was dark, but with the spotlights attached to the hull, I could tell the white paint needed a fresh coat. Badly. "Hello?" a gravelly man's voice said. The speaker leaned around the doorway. He was stocky, dressed in a plum-colored jacket that hid his knees and made him seem even shorter. "We're closing up, son. Sorry about that." "It's all right. I was just passing by." From my angle on the ramp, I could see inside the sandpiper. A heavy net was looped beside a shellacked, motorcycle-sized swordfish. There were framed pictures bolted to every surface. The man considered me. I felt his curious stare as he retreated into the ship. "Still time to take a look, if you don't mind not getting the full tour." I was close to saying no thanks, but one of the photos caught my eye. "What's this?" I asked, stepping up the plank into the wooden belly of the ship. The picture was faded in its frame, but someone had stamped an official-looking wax seal to the top corner. Imprinted in it was the telltale crown I had tattooed on my ribs. In the photo were several sailors gathered around a young man who stood beside a shark so big it could have eaten him twice over in one bite. "That would be Hansel Fredrickson, father of our recently departed King Hester. May they both rest in peace." He pulled his flat brown hat off his head in reverence. Beneath, his hair was thinned to oblivion. "Name's Mikkel, by the way." Squinting at the photo, I said, "Hawthorne." "This is Maverick's dad?" The young boy looked so damn happy. I wondered if my father had ever looked so cheerful. "Did you know them?" I asked, helplessly intrigued by the history. "What, the royal family? Yes and no." Putting his hat back on, Mikkel waved me deeper into the ship. He took me over to a huge book strapped down to a long table. "When I was small, I met the king. Hester was a nice enough boy. Shame what happened to him." Flipping the pages, he pointed. "It was his older brother, though, that came here the most. He signed, right here, the day he caught that swordfish." Glancing at the big fish attached to its plaque, I nodded slowly. When I was younger, I did recall going out on the ocean a few times with my father, but I'd thought he'd done it to entertain and win over powerful men with big wallets, not because he actually liked fishing. Mikkel sighed into his thin beard. "Terrible what that family has gone through. First, Hansel's wife passes away when the boys were just teens. Then their father goes a year later. Don't think Hansel was able to hang on without Luca around." Luca? My lungs seized up. I'd been given that as my middle name, but I'd never known it was to honor my father's mom. He eyed me suddenly. "You go to the funeral?" He has no idea who I am. Why would he? Looking at Maverick's name scrawled in the book, I said. "Yes, I stopped in." He nodded like he approved. "Me too. Once it opened to the public, I went and said my piece. Can't be more done than that by us common folk. Whatever happens after this is out of our hands." My fingers fell away from the book. "Thanks for showing me this." "Ah, my pleasure," he winked. "Showing people a slice of history is good for my soul. Doing my part and all." Backing up, I glanced once more at the photo of Hansel, then the giant swordfish. My father seemed to have had some of the same tastes as his own dad. I wondered how similar they'd been. Leaving the sandpiper left me plagued with new, but just as heavy thoughts. Nova had wanted me to see the ship. She'd wanted me to see as much of Torino as possible before I left. I'd thought I would try, because I'd expected the trip to be short. I didn't know if I had to be in such a hurry now. Chapter 10. Hawthorne. On the air floated a floral scent. Searching the street, I saw that I'd absently wandered back toward the cathedral where the funeral had been. Like I was possessed, I climbed the steps. The flowers were all still packed in the entry. There were more of them than before. Thanks to Mickle, I knew the residents had been allowed to pay their respects once those closest to the king had cleared out. Candles lit up the inside of the church. There were no people and no casket. Right. They buried him. It was obvious, and I felt odd for forgetting they would do that. Had my father watched in silence? I pictured my mother holding his hand like she had earlier. As terrible a dad as he'd been, it left me raw to think about him seeing his younger brother put in the cold earth. On impulse, I wandered out toward the cemetery. I was compelled to find the fresh grave. I'd gone this far. Attending the funeral without seeing the headstone of my uncle made it feel like a half measure. It was dark outside, the only light coming from the street beyond the metal fence and the two small sconces on the wall of the side door. It was enough for me to descend the steps to the cemetery grass, and enough for me to see what was waiting for me among the graves. Nova was leaning up against a tree, staring at one of the huge marble squares carved with names and dates of people long forgotten. The wind was tossing her hair, looping it around her ears and her delicate throat. My mind ran back over everything that had happened today. How she'd seen me fight her brothers, how she'd chased me down, desperate to talk to me, and I'd just shrugged her off. I'd been so on edge, I was acting like more of an ass than usual. Steeling myself, I approached her across the soft grass. You planning to rob some graves? She jolted upright. The moon reflected in her open eyes. They were dark as molasses at that hour. Hawthorne? Listen, I started to say, lifting my foot, closing the gap between us. About earlier. Stop! She cried. Stunned, I held up my hands with my fingers spread. I'm not going to hurt you. She pointed down as her whole face went red. Sorry, I know. It's just that you were about to step over a king's grave. It's bad luck. Running my fingers through my hair, I laughed without any humor. Do you know what can give me good luck? I'm topped off on bad. Carefully, I walked around the grave. Doing so brought me close to her, closer than I'd intended. The trees around us were shedding flower petals like red confetti. Nova inhaled as she noted our proximity, but with the big monument on one side and a tree on the other, there wasn't any way to create more distance. When her gentle cinnamon scent invaded my nose, I was happy for our predicament. She ended the silence first. He's over there. I followed her slim finger. On the opposite side of the cemetery was a large block of granite. Marigolds and roses had been arranged around it. Hester's grave. I can give you some privacy, she said gently. My attention flew back to her. What? That's why you're here, right? For your uncle? No, No. Palming my neck, I felt my pulse pounding. I just wanted to see where he was buried. I wasn't planning to talk to a bunch of dirt. A hairline of a wrinkle wrapped over her brow. Then it was smoothed away. How's your jaw? Rubbing my chin, I shrugged. Fine. It's my hand that hurts. Your brother is all mouth. It was like punching a wall. I'm sorry he and Richard went after you. They aren't happy about you being appointed the new king. Yeah, well, I'm not exactly happy either. She pulled her light blue jacket closer. It flared like an hourglass, drawing attention to her gorgeous curves in a way I didn't think she intended.
Having them decide all this without you must have felt like sabotage.
It's an awful joke. I'm sure he's got to hate that I'm his only option. Her thin fingers clutched tighter.
Your father, you mean?
Who else? I asked, drawing in a huge breath. Everything in me felt too tight, my lungs unable to get me enough air. Having Nova here to listen to me was working me up all over again. He never trusted me with any responsibilities before. He's always thought I was goofing off, and that's fine. It suited me well to not have to be under his damned scrutiny the way everyone else was. He was probably relieved to shove me into that dark hole of a strip club and forget about me. Nova rocked from side to side, uneasily.
Oh.
You shouldn't be shocked, I said. Your family has been spying on mine forever. You probably have a notebook full of notes about me and all the messed up stuff I've done, at that club and elsewhere. I looked up at the sky. I wonder if that miserable queen knows what she's getting into.
What do you mean? She asked.
I let my eyes drift back to her. I'm marrying Austere. You know all of this. There's no reason to play dumb. Nova squinted at me, and for a long while she didn't blink.
I can't believe no one explained this to you. You're not marrying my aunt. My parents expect you to marry me or my sister.
She said it so bluntly, like it was a fact as simple as water being wet. Even so, I searched her expression for some hint that this wasn't true. Nova remained serene, waiting for me to respond. You're not kidding, I finally said.
Of course not.
Her laugh was brief and sweet.
What good would marrying my aunt do?
I had no answer. Damn it, Rush's speculation had depressed me while being ultimately useless. Her smile went all coy.
How does this info change things,
Leaning toward her, I watched closely for her reactions. I was hooked on them. I see through your mysterious mask. You think that I'll happily accept this forced marriage because I could end up with a beautiful woman like you? You're impossibly shameless. She blushed furiously. It changed her lips to a richer red. One of the flower petals landed in her hair. Carefully, I reached out and plucked it free. My voice was a smoky whisper. You seem too nice to belong to the Valentines. The way she angled her chin reminded me temptingly of last night, when we'd kissed.
Maybe I am.
She extended her slim hand, and I thought she was going to remove a flower petal from me as I had for her. Many of them had settled on my shoulders and hair. Nova's fingers rested on my collarbone and didn't move.
I hope I'm not too nice for you.
In my gut, I knew I should be wary of this woman, but the shivers she caused erased the pain in my bruised knuckles. No one had ever soothed me so easily. It justified my eagerness to ignore the internal voice that warned me again and again who she was. You could be nicer. Her teeth glinted, bright in the moonlight. Her hand on my chest dug in, scraping lightly through my shirt.
I'm open to feedback.
Walking over a grave, I whispered, sliding my hand to cup behind her ear. You said it was bad luck.
You might not get me, she said, but I'm starting to understand you.
Am I that easy to figure out? I scoffed playfully. Nova watched me zip my jacket, studying my movements and thinking things I couldn't possibly guess. I ached to ask her what she'd learned about me, to beg her for even a hint of what she'd gleaned. Because after all these years, I wasn't sure I understood myself.
Chapter 11. Nova. The streets were mostly empty as I ran through them toward my hotel. It was doubtful I'd have noticed anyone if they were there, though. My brain was full of one thing: Thorne Badd. When I'd run into him yesterday, it had been an accident. I hadn't thought twice about leaping in to help the poor woman who'd been robbed. But then I'd looked up, and my heart had tangled in my ribs. Hawthorne was right there, right in front of me. Even though I'd changed drastically in the 6 months since we'd seen each other, he hadn't. He was still painfully beautiful. The same haunting hurt buried in his eyes and behind his ever-present smile. I'd actually thought I'd messed everything up, that he'd recognize me and wonder what was going on, why my family was here. It was better for my situation that he didn't know. It still stung. Worse, he'd thought I'd misled him all along. I didn't get it. How could his father not have prepared him? I knew my father had talked to the man about wanting to arrange this marriage. Just last night, he'd sent a message to Maverick's hotel room laying out the general offer. Why had Thorne's own father not warned him? Because he didn't have a chance, I realized abruptly. Frosty's shame slowed my running. Thorne was with me all night. He didn't go back to his hotel until after we separated. That had been close to midnight. Thinking it over, I wondered if a warning would have made much difference. He really doesn't want to be the king. I'd expected him to be excited about the news. Most people would jump for joy over such a blessing. I'd listened to my brothers seethe over being told they couldn't claim the throne by force, that it didn't work that way. If you didn't have blue blood, Torino wouldn't accept you as a ruler. Thorne was entitled to the position, but he still resisted. When I remembered his cold shoulder as he'd run away from me outside the church, it turned my stomach inside out. I'd been shocked when he'd confronted me in the cemetery tonight. I'd gone there to get some privacy, tired of all the manipulation my family couldn't resist taking part in. After Thorne appeared, plucking flowers from my hair, I hadn't wanted to be alone. Thinking about it made my skin sizzle. How was it possible for me to come away from what we'd done and remain so unchanged? Was it because I'd already transformed so much? Remembering the hard edges of his teeth, where they'd explored my softest spots. I clutched a hand to my chest. Did he have any guess what it meant for me? Could he sense the sheer magnitude of it? I almost ran straight into my brothers as I pushed through the doors of the hotel we were staying at. They were standing in the lobby, talking in hushed tones. Larchmont spotted me, his skin oddly shiny like he'd been out for a jog. His face still swollen. Thorne hadn't managed to break my brother's nose, and even if it was awful, I wished he had. It might have washed off some of Larch's self-righteous elitism. Seeing them fight had been a shock for me. I was so used to my brothers having the upper hand in everything. But Thorne had held his own. He'd fought back like he was angry at something much bigger than any of them. Larchmont nudged Richard, who turned, scanning my face. "Why do you two look so guilty?" I asked, eyeing them up and down as I tried to get to the stairs. Larch snorted, blocking my path. "Us? You're the one who was gone all night. What were you doing?" "Getting some air, out of my way." Richard moved aside, but my other brother didn't. "Slow down." He grabbed my upper arm, squeezing me tight, keeping me from going anywhere. "Remember who you're talking to." He dug in until I winced in pain. The men at the front desk busied themselves, avoiding getting involved. "Don't forget whose side you're on, sis." He released me. I gingerly rubbed my skin. I know what side I'm on. "Sure you do," he said quietly, something dangerous putting an edge to his tone. "You were only crying out for Thorne, warning him in the fight because you were trying to help me." I held his stare. "Attacking him was your choice, not mine. I wasn't going to stand there while you and Richard ruined everything." When I slid my glare to Richard, he had the grace to turn away and stare at the floor. "It's like you didn't even listen to Dad." "I listened. I was just seeing what made that shithead so worthy of the crown." My eyes danced to his facial bruises. "Did you find out?" That made his smug smile crumble. Quickly, I hurried up the stairs. He didn't follow, and I was grateful. It was stupid to egg Larch on, but his violent urges made my skin crawl. Behind me in the hallway came footsteps. I whirled around, ready to face off with Larchmont again, but it wasn't him following me. "Richard?" I asked, nodding my eyebrows. The biggest of my brothers approached. He filled the hallway, his size known to intimidate everyone. Not me, though. As awfully as I'd been treated by my family, Richard had never wielded the same cruelty. He put his hands in his pockets. Casting a shifty glance over his shoulder, he came to stand over me. "Nova, listen. I don't think you should be starting fights with Larch." My eyes narrowed. "Is that what you really wanted to talk to me about?" His head shifted down. When he finally met my stare, his pupils were wide, his frown gentle. "I'm not oblivious. I saw the way you chased Hawthorne down the street after the funeral." Heat flowed up my neck. "He saw that?" "If Larchmont sent you to hammer the point home—" "He didn't." Richard fidgeted, his large shoulders rising. "I'm here because I'm worried about you. Nova, don't get too close to Hawthorne. Even if you might end up marrying him, we're your family, not him." His features twisted. "I hate the idea of you being alone with that guy." The anger melted from my body. It happened too fast for me to grab it, and with it went my armor. "Richard, I get that you're concerned, but please don't treat me like I'm weak." He flinched, like he realized he was talking down to me the way my parents always did. "You're not weak," he started, carefully picking his words. "But after what you've been through, what I went through is what made me strong," I said flatly. I glanced toward the wall, still speaking to him. "If you think I'm being manipulated by Thorne, you're wrong." He went silent. Finally, I heard him start to leave. "Regardless, I've got your back." His words flowed over his shoulder just before he vanished around the corner. It took me a while to gather myself. I was tempted to run after Richard and thank him for his concern. He'd always been quiet. If he was telling me he was worried, then he really meant it. I appreciated that, but his concern was misplaced. I reached my room on the 3rd floor without taking the elevator. I didn't mind the effort. I was buzzing with too much energy and needed to burn it off. Richard had left my mind swirling. I made myself focus on something better. Hawthorne. Talking to that man was one thing, but kissing him, having sex with him, it had taken my brain and stretched it out to dry in the sun. I'd been flayed open, and I loved it. The memory of his hard muscles made me shiver deliciously. I opened my door and stopped on the threshold. Sitting on my bed were 2 women, my mother, Valencia, and my younger sister, Darla. She was a carbon copy of my mom, slender, with the same golden red hair, except she kept hers curled into big bouncy ringlets, the kind a little girl's doll would have. Even though she was 22, she loved to wear a mix of childish ribbons, stockings, and Mary Janes, all while her hems were too high or her necklines too deep. It was oddly perverse. Darla appeared half asleep, the way a lazy cat that always got what it wanted did. "Look who's finally back," she said, kicking her feet at the edge of the bed. By my large window, I saw a third figure. Austere was still wearing the same black lace she'd worn at the funeral. "Auntie," I said, acknowledging her. The older woman glanced once at me, her smile sad, before she stared out at the city again. Watching my mother, I popped the buttons open on my coat. "Were you all waiting for me?" When she swayed onto her feet, my mother reminded me of a willow switch blowing in a light breeze. Those beautiful, slim branches could be used to burn cuts into sensitive skin. "Where did you go after dinner?" she asked. "For a walk. I told Darla I was going out. She'd caught me in the hallway outside my room after I'd slipped into my jacket. Now she was watching me with the kind of glee unique to those that enjoyed their siblings getting in trouble. My mother didn't even look at Darla on the bed. She kept her burned maple eyes firmly on me. "You're saying you've been wandering around for the last 3 hours?" Heat started to swim up my body. I did my best to keep it from showing in my face. I willed myself to remain neutral. "It was lovely by the ocean. I lost track of time." She judged me, and I knew she was trying to see where my lies began and ended. Finally, she sighed, giving me some release when she turned away to fix her hair in the dresser mirror. "You should have called me. You could have gotten lost, and then where would we be?" I tensed up, hearing what was being said between the lines about my capabilities. I wouldn't get lost. I've been to this city a number of times. I'm not scatterbrained. My mother studied me as she spoke. "Perhaps, but you're clearly not aware enough to have noticed that this city is full of unseemly types these days." "I know," Darla gushed, wrinkling her nose. "Did you see all the dirty people sleeping next to our hotel? Disgusting!" Clenching my fists was all I could do to keep myself from shouting, "It's our fault they're homeless." My parents had been siphoning money from the royal vault for some time, and the effect on the country got worse every year. "Anyway," Darla said, leaning eagerly toward me off the bed. Her lips were pulled back in an excited grin. "I heard you were there earlier when Larch and Rich got their butts kicked by Hawthorne. Tell me all the gritty details. Don't gossip about your brothers getting injured," my mother huffed. Darla rolled her eyes. "Mom, maybe you and Auntie should go to bed. Leave us 2 girls alone, Watch it, young lady." "That's soon-to-be young queen," my sister chuckled. Her words made my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth. "And when I'm married to that violent fool, as I heard him described, you'll be the ones who have to watch out." She winked. Off to the side, Austere angled her body, scrutinizing my sister. I wondered what she was thinking about all this. Did it hurt to have us casually discuss that we'd be replacing her? Drawing to her full height, my mother stared down at Darla. Quickly, my sister threw up her hands, laughing. "Kidding! I'm kidding. I'm not going to try and push you around, Mom." Hanging my coat up by the door, I fingered the cuff, speaking more to it than them. "You think he'll choose you?" "Of course he will," Darla said. She jumped to her feet and was adjusting her dress. "Look at me. I'm his dream girl." "Why would you want to marry someone you just met?" I asked, mirroring Thorne's question to me in the cemetery. Darla squinted, as if I'd started spinning on my head. "That's a stupid question. Who would turn down a chance at being queen?" Studying her nails, she picked at one. Besides, he's kind of hot. Her eyes shot back to me, her smile faltering. Wait. Don't tell me you want to marry him? Before I could respond, my mother came to stand beside me. Her hand was solid on my shoulder. Her affection was a recent thing. I was still adjusting to it. A greedy part of me was hungry for any kindness she'd offer, after going so long without it. It doesn't matter what either of you want. Darla, you're the obvious choice, and if he picks you, I'm sure you'll know what to do. But Nova... She trailed off, then tightened her grip. I expect you'll accept your duty all the same. I touched her hand, then walked over to sit on the bed and pull off my shoes. I knew what I was getting into when you and Dad told us the plan. I'd had to control myself from smiling too much at the time. The idea of marrying Thorne Badd, it was wild. More than I'd ever thought would happen. But any uncertainty I'd had, any doubt, had vanished after our first kiss. Darla, Mom cried. Yes, I know. She flipped her hair over her shoulders. But an arranged marriage is still a marriage, and we all know that I'm the one the guys chase. Unless, have men been chasing you that I don't know about, Nova? Her jab was meant to be cruel. She wanted to nail me on how I'd never dated anyone before. But I was busy smiling at something on my leg. Touching the bandage Thorne had pressed to my scrape yesterday, I shrugged. Who knows? I felt Darla stare. Giving her a side eye, I held my silent smile. I knew she was trying to read my face. I also knew she couldn't. Black lace swept into my vision on the floor. Austere had come to stand before me. She tossed her veil back, letting me see her benevolent smile. Unlike my mother's, her eyes were green. Austere had always seemed older than she was, the way adults are when you've known them since you were small. But the last few years had turned her soft skin into hardened, wiry grooves. You know, she said, her hands glued together in front of her waist, like she was afraid to touch anything around her. I was nervous about marrying Hester originally, but your mother encouraged me to go for it. In the end, I did love him very much. The same could happen between you and Thorne. She'd misread my defensiveness as fear. I didn't correct her. Auntie, will you really leave this place after living here for so long? Her stare drifted away, seeing something other than the hotel room. Yes, this country never welcomed me. All I want is to return to the States so I can mourn Hester in peace. As much as I loathed what she had helped my parents do to Torino, it struck me as incredibly sad to realize Austere had loved a man who is now gone forever. When she walked around me toward the door, I whispered, I hope you find that peace you want. I mean it. Her eyes widened in shock, her smile hesitant, but genuine. Come on, my mother said. Let's go to bed, Darla. We'll see you in the morning. Remember to wear something nice for the luncheon. The black dress I hung up for you is the one I'd prefer. She doesn't even trust me enough to dress myself. That stung almost as much as the fact that she didn't know I hated the color black. She'd had one of our staff back home go shopping for me for this trip, giving them a list of her own preferences, never once asking my input. When I was alone, I finished stripping down. In front of the bathroom mirror, I turned from side to side, checking myself for any hint that there was a difference in me after I'd had sex with Thorne. If I didn't feel it internally, perhaps it would show on the outside. Hadn't Larchmont said I looked guilty when I ran into him? But there was nothing I could see. Just my smooth skin, free of tattoos. Nothing at all like that man's stunning form. Even if I wasn't as flawless as he, I wasn't ashamed of my soft shape. Once I had been. Not any longer. I traced a finger up my hip, then around, finally rolling over the raised scar tissue on my lower stomach. He hadn't seen it because we hadn't undressed. Would I tell him about it if he asked? Part of me thought I'd spill my soul to him. My secrets were by omission. I didn't intend to lie, it didn't matter. Nothing about who I'd been, or how I'd found my way to metamorphosis was important. The only thing I cared about was now. Turning off the light, I fumbled for my bed in my blindness. I welcomed the pressure of the thick, heavy covers. They made me feel solid, like I wasn't about to vanish into thin air. Lying there, I gazed at the ceiling I couldn't see in the dark. My mind was racing too much for me to sleep, but I was used to staying awake. I didn't sleep much these days. I spent my quiet time reading or drawing, whatever struck my mood. Every minute I wasn't doing something was a waste. Tomorrow he'll decide who he'll marry. Darla was oblivious to the connection I had with Thorne. I'd clung to it since the start, since long before I'd ever spoken to the man. Even before seeing him in person, I'd been eager to know more about him. It had arisen from the pages of data my father had his spies collect. He'd handed them out to us, drilled us on the knowledge so that we were always aware of what the Badds were up to. It was my father's game that I had to be a part of. I did as he asked, and he left me alone. I'd thought that was enough. I was sure that life consisted of looking at my feet while never standing up to men like my father. Meeting Hawthorne really had changed everything. Shutting my eyes, I stared at an inkiness no different from the lightless room. I was filled with a glorious, relaxed soreness I'd never experienced before. The insides of my thighs were tender. Parts of me were raw when I rocked this way or that. Life was so good. Remembering my wish, I placed my palm gently on my scar. I didn't wonder if my suffering had been worth it. Not when I thought about the way Thorne had flirted with me, courted me, kissed me, fucked me. Karma made me confident that it wasn't possible for life to throw any more tragedy at my feet. I fell asleep not realizing how naive I was, how wrong I was. But I would learn.
Chapter 12. Hawthorne. Lifting the newspaper, I offered it to my father when he opened the door to his hotel room. "Happy back from the dead day," I said with a smile. His grim frown didn't budge. "Get in here." "I'm guessing you already saw the paper," I said, following him inside. My mother was sitting at a table in the morning sunlight. She'd pulled her hair up on her head. It showed off her long neck where her velvety pale purple robe didn't hide it. There were pockets under her tired eyes. Looking at me, she offered a croissant from the basket she had. They must have ordered room service. "Morning, Thorne," she said. "Here, eat up. You're going to need your energy today." As opposed to every other day. I dropped the paper on the table. I took the croissant, bit off a hunk, and chewed. My father was sitting on the huge bed, gripping his own copy of the newspaper and staring at it. I knew what he was reading. I'd read it multiple times, too, when I'd picked it up off my hallway floor. Long Lost Prince returns. Will he take the crown? Swallowing the bread, I flapped the paper I'd brought and read it aloud. "Maverick Fredrickson comes back from the dead. Multiple authorities have confirmed his identity after an official statement from Glenn Finbar of the Royal Guard, but no one can confirm why our lost prince has come home. Does he want to take his late brother's place? I squinted at my dad. Well, does he? My mother's hand rested on mine. Sit, she said. Please. Hesitating, I settled across from her at the table. She didn't let go of me. I know this isn't what you wanted when you came to Torino. It's not what I wanted ever, I corrected. I'm not Cain or Costello. I don't want a wife to stroke my ego all day. Though now that I say it... Stop playing around, Maverick snapped. I glanced at him as he rose from the bed. You're always making damned jokes. There's nothing to laugh at here. Laughter is the only thing keeping me from swinging my fists. I chuckled sourly. My mother squeezed my hand, drawing my attention again. Ma, it's nice that you're trying to calm me down, but nothing you say is going to make this easier. I know that. Her eyes fell away, over to the window. Thorne, you don't have to become king. What? I asked, stunned. What? My father growled. She looked at each of us in turn. No one will force you, especially not us. My father moved our way. He stopped when she glared at him and lifted her hand in the air. Especially not us, she repeated. Carmina? Maverick said warily. Her dark eyes flashed. She was the only person I knew who could challenge my father and win. When he remained standing, she looked back at me with a small, gentle smile. This is your choice. I'm going to give you all the information you need so you can decide what you want to do. I held her eyes. I want to know what happens if I say no. I had a strong suspicion, but needed to hear her say it. The Valentines will fight to keep the throne. They'll kill everyone who dares to threaten their claim. Our whole family, I said, frowning. Yes, but not just us. The people of Torino will reject them too. They believe strongly in the royal succession. It'll be a bloodbath before they give the crown to a family that has no claim. A void formed in my belly. I tasted bile instead of the sweet pastry from before. Can't we just tell them we won't take the throne or whatever? I pointed at Maverick. You ran once. Let's tell them we'll run again and never come back. He made bulging fists at his sides. It's not that easy. Sure it is. We shake Curtis's hand, tell them good luck, and off we go. No, he said, looking at the floor. I can't. Confused, I judged his expression, how flustered he suddenly seemed. A cold tingle swam through the creases of my brain. You don't want to give the crown up, do you? He managed to look at me. I think if I'd been in his shoes, I would have been too ashamed to do the same. This country is a mess. My brother left it in shambles. I can't turn my back on everyone a second time. His honesty shocked me enough that some of my anger dissipated. What's stopping you from becoming the king again? Weren't you listening yesterday? He sighed. They want to put one of their own up there next to you. That's the agreement, and I'm not getting a divorce to make that happen. My mom clicked her tongue. Of course not. And me trying to take the crown by force is as good as going to war with the Valentines, he said. I won't put so many people in danger. I wanted to ask if saving this place was worth sacrificing me. Instead, I turned back to my mother. Tell me what happens if I say yes. My parents shared a quick look. I think, she said slowly, that depends on you. They've got 2 girls, Darla and Nova. Both have agreed to the marriage. So I do get some say in this, I said, chuckling. I didn't tell them Nova had already explained this part to me. It felt good to have one secret when they had so many. Is this how they did it when you were younger, Dad? Arranged marriages? He shook his head and folded his arms. No, though many families would try to get their daughters close to my brother and me, vying for attention. The things they'd do to win us over. My mother tightened her lips. He cleared his throat. Anyway, it sounds like you're considering this offer now. I leaned my chair back on its rear legs, balancing. You staked Rush at my room yesterday. Did you have him there to give you a heads up in case I ran away after what went down at the funeral? Maverick considered me for a minute. I always expect the best from my children. You must be disappointed constantly then, I said, standing. I want to talk this over with the Valentines more. I need to know what everyone is getting out of this, beyond us keeping our heads. Some tension left my father's face. It's already been set. What has? My mother rose and headed to the bathroom. The meeting, she said, vanishing around the corner. They're expecting us for lunch today. Of course they are. When I become king, everyone has to start telling me the plans. I hate being out of the loop. When you become king, my dad said, clapping me on the shoulder, you'll have a lot more to worry about than lunch meetings. It was an interesting experience leaving the hotel. I knew word had gotten out about my father returning to the country, but I wasn't quite ready for the amount of attention that would bring us. Rush warned us before we left our rooms. He and the other guards made sure there was a path for us so we could get from the lobby to the car that was waiting on the street. I tried to tell how my father felt about the rows of cameras waiting to take pictures of us as we hovered just inside the hotel's front doors. His emotionless expression made it too hard. My mother, at least, was enjoying the attention. Back home, she was very aware that the local news might snap a photo or two of her while she was out on the town or having lunch with a friend. She seemed quite comfortable with her dark glasses hiding her eyes and her lips shining deep pink as they held a perfect smile. She'd even changed the outfit she was going to wear when Rush came to our room with the news about the paparazzi outside. Instead of the lovely but simple green sundress that she'd been wearing, she'd quickly changed into something more luxurious and expensive. It looked like a white power suit, except that the middle was a corset in glittery gold, a skirt-like flare sticking out at her hips. It's a peplum, she told me when she saw my baffled look. I had no clue what that was, but I nodded. Following my father down the front steps, we braced for the explosive questions and flashing lights of the cameras. Maverick! Someone shouted. What do you think about your brother's death? Maverick! Maverick! Someone else demanded. Is it true you've been running this country from the shadows all this time? Are you here to take the crown? Will you move into the castle? Is it true you changed your last name? The reporters got too close, screaming questions at my parents. I was partially blinded by all the flashes, and I wished that I'd worn sunglasses like my mother. Hey! One of the paparazzi shouted. Hey, Maverick! Why don't you get the fuck out of here, huh? I turned, squinting to see who was saying such bold things to my father. Didn't they know who he was? Of course they do. That's why they're so angry. What did you do? Run away? Abandon your country? Hightail it out of here when your daddy got sick because you couldn't handle the pressure? Hester ruined Torino. Do you get that? Your brother was a piece of shit. And you're a piece of shit too. I saw the man now. He was wearing a badge like all the other paparazzi, so he wasn't just some crazy rando in the street. People were videotaping the encounter. My father faced the car with stiff shoulders. He seemed frozen with inaction. I'd never seen him take such abuse so quietly. My mother put a hand out, comforting him. I couldn't hear what she said over the murmur of the crowd, but I did hear what the reporter yelled. Is that who you left us for?
some piece of ass? Anger turned my blood hot. Was she worth it? Was the bitch worth making the rest of us suffer thanks to you being a goddamn coward? Hey, I shouted, stomping toward the man. He'd pushed forward so much that he was leaning over the arm of one of the security guards. Hawthorne, no, my mom hissed. Ignoring her, I went nose to nose with the reporter. I saw Rush nearby, his eyebrows arched with panic. They'd been ready to stop the paparazzi, but not ready to stop me. I don't know who you are, I said, looming over him, but you need to back off. Now. The man gave a haphazard grin. His eyes flashed toward my mother, then back to me. Who are you, huh? Her personal bodyguard? Sleeping with her and Maverick in some twisted little menage? A tornado of fury made my vision swim. Stop saying sick shit about my mom, or you're going to be finding out what your camera tastes like. His eyes narrowed. Your mom? That makes you Maverick's son? My mother grabbed my wrist, taking me toward the car. I couldn't rip my eyes away from that asshole. I stared at him until I was in the vehicle and behind the tinted windows. Fuck, that pisses me off, I said softly. My mother gave my wrist a pat. Turning, I looked at my dad. Why didn't you say anything? He stared straight ahead. What could I say? They're not wrong. I did run away. Thrown off, I bent around my mom, yelling at him. My voice was louder than it needed to be in the car, but I didn't care. Not about that! That guy was insulting your wife! Maverick blinked. He turned, looking at me, then to my mother. Firmly, he took her hands, cupping them in his. You're right. I'm sorry, Carmina. I was distracted. He winced, and I thought, if I wasn't there, he would have told her more. Instead, he went quiet, aided by her head falling on his shoulder. It's all right. Those bastards out there are small potatoes. You ever listen to the gossip rags in Providence? They've said way worse things about me than these schmucks. She brushed it off so casually, I actually believed that the words thrown at her hadn't hurt her at all. But they'd sliced right through me. I loved my mother with all I had, and I wasn't sure I could control myself if the paparazzi went off on her in front of me again. Picturing that man's face whenever I shut my eyes, I instead stared out the window at the busy streets for the entire trip. None of us spoke, though my dad did field a few text messages. Business never stopped for him. The Valentines were waiting for us in a beautiful garden patio that was hidden at the back of the Tin Whistle Grill. It was quiet. I was sure the servers had arranged to keep our sequestered table more private than usual. The sky could be glimpsed through the wooden beams overhead. Vines hung with trumpet-shaped flowers draped the beams from end to end. Tiny hummingbirds the color of overripe grapes darted through the air, helping themselves to the nectar. It was a fantastical sight, but my interest lay in something even more attractive. Nova sat at the table with her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing a layered dress the color of cream soda. It made her cinnamon eyes look extra vibrant. Her hair was braided in a design that kept her neck exposed. Curtis and Valencia were sitting to her left. On her right was a young woman I'd seen with them at the funeral. I assumed this was her sister, Darla. The green top she had on was clinging to her breasts like a pair of angry hands. If her long ringlets hadn't been draped over her shoulders to hide most of her cleavage, the outfit would have been too obscene to wear in public. I was relieved that none of Nova's brothers were around. I'd be happy to never see them again. Approaching the table, I placed myself directly in front of Nova. "Hey there," I said with a smile. "Hey," she responded. When I rested my hands on the table, she looked at them,
I wondered if she was remembering how they had felt on her body, how they had felt inside her. With a slight grin, I flexed my 2 fingers, like I was scratching at the tabletop. Nova swallowed, shifting from side to side. Yes, she definitely remembered how my fingers had felt inside her tight pussy last night. "Curtis," my father said, as he sat down beside me. My mother joined him, nodding politely at the others.
"I hope you didn't wait long," she said. "This is a lovely place."
"It is," Valencia agreed. "And I've heard that the crab bisque they serve is divine." Their empty back and forth instantly got under my skin. "All right," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Are we all just going to pretend that this is a normal lunch we're having here? Because I'm not that great at playing pretend." The girl I didn't know giggled. It was a sharp sound, too loud, too enthusiastic to be real.
"You are funny," she said, folding her hands under her chin and leaning my way over the table.
The way she called me funny reminded me disturbingly of Larchmont.
"I'm Darla, by the way."
She extended her arm toward me. Her hands looked smooth, with the same healthy tan that the rest of the Valentines had. While Nova kept her nails clean and bare, her sister wore glittery purple polish. I gripped her hand. "I'm Hawthorne, but I'm guessing you knew that. We've met before, haven't we?" She held my hand like she didn't want me to pull away. When I did, her smile twitched but stayed on her face.
"So you do remember me. I got to visit your lovely estate a while back."
I'd recognized Darla easier than I had Nova, which filled me with shame. But Darla was just the type of girl who drew attention to herself. Even if it wasn't the best kind of attention, even if it didn't endear me to her, she knew how to draw you in. It leaked out of her every movement. The air around her seemed to attract and confuse the hummingbirds. Her perfume made her smell sweet, but there was no nourishment here for the birds. Everything about this girl was a lie within a lie, and she definitely fit in with her family more than Nova did. Curtis rocked forward, his elbows on the table and his fingers woven together. "I don't mind getting to the point. I assume your mother and father laid out our offer." "Is that what you're calling it? Your offer?" I snorted. "Say it for what it is. A threat so that I'll marry Nova. This isn't much different than the offer you made to me and my family months ago. How did you put it back then? Something about no danger coming to us as long as we didn't try to rise above our stations?" Every eye was on me. Curtis's lips were thin from being pressed together. I wondered what my father's expression was, but I didn't break from my stare down. I wanted Curtis to know he didn't scare me. None of them did. Valencia breathed in, gathering herself and shattering the tension with a little clap.
"All I heard in that little rant of yours is that you've chosen Nova, which is good. That's a step in the right direction."
I stiffened at her observation. I'd been angry, but I hadn't meant to reveal something that they could use against me. I looked over at Nova. She was chewing on her bottom lip, pulling it back and forth over her bottom row of teeth. I wondered what she was thinking. She was much harder to read than her sister, who was turning pink and openly scowling at me. I guessed she'd stop wasting her time flirting with me now. Maverick motioned for a waiter. "The vibe is a bit aggressive," he said. "Let's order some drinks, and then we can continue with the details." "Fine." I leaned over my mother so that I could speak to the waiter first. "Do you know how to make a brown derby?" The waiter blinked stupidly. "It's not complicated. Tell your bartender to just mix some bourbon with some honey and grapefruit juice." Everyone else ordered wine. In silence, we sat, and even after the drinks came, we still tiptoed around the elephant in the room. It was driving me mad. I started to count the hummingbirds to stay sane. Under the table, something nudged me. Lifting my eyes, I caught Nova smiling. It was a tiny twist of her lips, like she was silently apologizing for the situation her family had put us in. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to be sorry. I knew the helplessness that came along with being the child of a power-hungry father. Setting her goblet down, Valencia went, "Ahem." It drew everyone's attention. Let me start by saying this. My sister has lived a very comfortable life here for many, many years. My mother hummed under her breath. Amazing that she's willing to just walk away from all that comfort. I see she didn't deign to join us either. The other woman's smile was plastic beneath her vibrant, peach-colored lipstick. Let me finish. She lived comfortably, but the people here never embraced her. She's quite relieved to exit and return to the States. Austere won't interfere with you taking the crown, she finished while turning her hooded eyes to me. Of course she won't, I said, shrugging lazily. She's got a sister who'll keep feeding her money probably supplied by this kingdom. All the reward, none of the work. Thorne, my mother sighed. Then she pursed her lips and said flatly, Well, he's not wrong. She glanced over at Curtis and his wife. Both of you clearly benefited from her being the queen. I expect you'll give her anything she needs to support her lavish lifestyle elsewhere. Her directness had me and my father grinning into our drinks. Curtis pushed his shoulder blades back, cracking the joints. There's more than enough wealth in the royal vaults to go around. A little to my sister-in-law won't hurt anyone. Nova squirmed, suddenly interested in the basket of bread on the table. She took a piece, but she didn't eat it, just looked at it from multiple angles. So break it down for me, I said. How exactly would you like this to go? Curtis eyed his two daughters as he spoke to me. You would marry one of them. Nova sounds like your preference. He tossed me a quick look and a quicker smile. We would then stage an engagement photo session to announce to Torino and the world that the crown prince in line for the throne is marrying Nova Valentine. That would lead some positive buzz into the coronation dinner. After that, it would be a simple matter to arrange the wedding, making it official. You really do have our lives planned out, I mused. Why was my glass empty already? I didn't recall inhaling my drink, but I must have. There is more. Curtis turned his attention to my parents. We all know that this marriage would only protect my family for so long. If something happened to Hawthorne, well, we'd be back to square one. How considerate of you to worry about my health. I didn't hide the poison in my voice. What would keep this union from just being a waste of time? And as I asked, I knew the answer. A baby, Nova said, finally lifting her eyes from the torn-up bread. My parents expect us to create the heir that Austere couldn't. Sweat began to sprout along my throat. Yes, her father said. That's exactly it. A child is the only thing that would truly protect my family from being tossed aside in the long run. It secures our future claim to the crown by blood. Thorne? My mother asked gently. You're hearing this? Oh, I'm hearing it, loud and clear. I tilted my glass, squinting into it. It was empty. It didn't matter. No amount of alcohol could wipe clean the sensation of unease growing inside me. I was going to become not just the king, but a father. My whole life was laid out in front of me. But it wasn't my fate. It wasn't ever supposed to be. If it belonged to anyone, it was Costello. That thought made me realize how little my father had said in this whole meeting. How could he sit there, silently letting this happen? I pivoted so I could level my glare at him. He was hunched forward, all hard plains and emotionless rock. I guess you shouldn't have wasted all that time preparing Costello for this kind of life, huh? I laughed, and I was sure they could all hear my disgust. It's just crazy. I know it's a lot, Nova said gently. And if you don't want to do it, I understand. Her mother whipped her head around so fast it sent her hair rippling down her bare shoulders. She was watching her daughter like she was prepared to smack a palm over her mouth to shut her up. Nova ignored her. She only had eyes for me. I really, really would understand if you didn't want to do this. When I sat in that meeting at your estate, I was terrified. Her frown fluttered into place. I wanted to kiss it away. You didn't know me. I didn't know you. I'm sure you thought I was as awful as my brothers. And I know you didn't like the tentative peace treaty we all agreed on. You have no reason to want to be with me, not a single one. She made fists on the table, and a wave of determination moved through the line of her jaw, making it harder. If you give me a chance, I think we can make this work. And if it means that everyone you love and everyone I love can go on and live for years and years without looking over their shoulders in fear, isn't it worth a shot? The entire table was silent. My heart was throbbing, and I didn't know whether it was from appreciation for her honesty or panic over the fact that I felt myself agreeing with her. If she was tricking me, she was doing a damn good job of it. I was compelled to back down from the growing disgust inside me. I want everyone to know that I'm not a fan of this kind of ambush, I said carefully, but I'm even less a fan of my family or myself having our throats slit. I looked at Nova, studying how still she was. How brave was this woman? Or was I just an idiot to believe her speech? I'll do it, I said. I mean, you probably guessed that I would, since you aren't really giving me many options. I'd planned to make a much bigger deal about this and be much more difficult, but Nova, let's just say she's more charming than I was ready for. Darla rolled her eyes. Why am I even here? She asked. I could have avoided being embarrassed like this if Nova had just said that she had this guy wrapped around her little finger. Darla, Valencia warned. Her daughter folded her arms. Just let me know when I can bring my things over to the castle. I'm sick of that hotel room. And I should at least get something nice out of this trip for all my troubles. If I hadn't been turned off by Darla before, I definitely was now. About that, my father said. I too would like to move into the castle. I expect that won't be a problem. Your son is about to become king, Curtis chuckled. I don't see anyone trying to bar you from entering the castle. It belongs to all of us. We're all going to be one big happy family now, aren't we? His words turned my stomach. Under the table, I gave Nova's foot a slight kick, just to get her attention. It worked, and she rewarded me with a questioning smile. You're really sure about this? I asked, as quietly as I could. It was for her ears alone. She glanced around, then back at me. Of course. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't sure. Her confidence made my pulse throb. It drove me crazy, wondering how much of her wanted this marriage with me, and how much of her was after something else. There were a lot of unknowns. I waved my empty glass at the waiter. Then I guess we should toast our inevitable engagement. Did you buy the ring already, too? I asked, arching my eyebrows at Curtis and his wife. Write our vows while you were at it? Nova flinched, but my mother, her eyes lit up. We might as well have some fun with this, she said. I'll meet with the engagement photographer, and I definitely want to help with the wedding. Oh gosh, we'll need to invite everyone we can with such short notice. Your siblings would kill me if they missed this. The rest of the meal went by mostly in silence. No one really had anything to discuss, and it was obvious we were still on shaky ground. None of us were friends. All of us wanted something from each other. And as I finished off the new drink the waiter brought me, I wondered if any of us would get what we were after.